The 21st century brought absolute doom. Massive portals violently ripped through the sky. Humanity called them gates. These cosmic tears birthed infinite labyrinths. They were known as the catacombs. Within these abyssal depths, nightmares crawled. Grotesque abominations known as enemies claimed the dark. If left unchecked, the catacombs overflowed. The beasts breached our reality. They hungered for human flesh. Mankind stood utterly defenseless. Civilizations crumbled into mountains of ash. The world wept in despair. But a glimmer of hope sparked. Destiny chose a gifted few. Those who braved the abyssal depths awakened. They forged supernatural powers. Humanity called them skills. Mankind finally struck back. The slaughter ended. A new era of champions arose. These awakened conquerors cleared the labyrinths. They were honored as dungeon divers. The present day seemed peaceful. Sunlight poured into a mundane classroom. The teacher preached of modern legends. Players and dungeon divers stood at the pinnacle of society. Yet, one boy stared blankly out the window. His name was Soda Suzaki. The main character carried a heavy, tragic legacy. Both his parents were renowned divers. His father perished in a savage battle. His mother suffered a dark fate. Still, a fiery dream burned within Soda. He yearned to stand among the awakened elites. Suddenly, an icy chill gripped the air. A phantom materialized beyond the glass. The shadowy beast bared jagged fangs. It lunged forward. It wanted to feast on his soul. Pure terror struck his core. His heart hammered violently against his ribs. A blood-curdling scream escaped his lungs. The classroom fell dead silent. His peers cast glaring, judgmental looks. Whispers of mockery filled the room. This humiliating scene was a daily routine. He collapsed to the floor, trembling. He was completely alone in his terror. No one else possessed the eyes to see the phantom. The curse had manifested recently. The veil of reality tore open for him alone. Unseen horrors stalked his every waking moment. The world called it spirit sight. It was a rare, haunting vision. Years ago, his late father dragged him into a catacomb. He tried to force Soda's awakening, but the boy possessed only crushing fear. He failed miserably. The main character survived the grueling nightmare. He endured hours of absolute dread. Yet, his core remained dormant. The spark of power refused to ignite. He could never match the legendary legacy of the strongest flame master. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. A classmate extended a seemingly warm hand. Soda froze in sheer disbelief. This was the last person who would ever help him. The boy was Tokuto Saiga. He was a childhood friend turned prodigy. Tokuto was a true player. He had already awakened a formidable skill. Tokuto yanked him upright. A venomous whisper pierced Soda's ear. After school, the usual place. Cold sweat drenched the weak boy's back. The ignorant class praised the golden boy. They applauded his fake kindness. Soda knew the dark truth. Hours later, he walked into the designated alley. A brutal fist shattered his jaw. "You are late, fake spirit medium." The golden boy snarled. Tokuto was no hero. He was a merciless, sadistic tormentor. The prodigy glared down with utter disgust. Soda writhed in agony on the cold concrete. Tokuto hoisted the battered boy by his throat. He demanded his tribute. Soda surrendered his last crumpled bills. "Is this all?" the tyrant hissed. Murderous intent leaked from his aura. Soda choked out a desperate plea. He needed every single cent. His mother's life support depended on it. A vicious kick cracked Soda's ribs. Tokuto sneered with pure malice. He ordered him to abandon the dying woman. She was a comatose corpse, lost forever to the catacombs. The cruel tyrant crossed the ultimate line. He spat on the legendary Flame Master. He called the dead hero a lunatic. He declared both parents as pathetic, useless trash. The tormentor twisted the knife deeper. He accused Soda of faking the spirit sight. A pathetic lie. A desperate shield to hide his absolute worthlessness. Hot, bitter tears streamed down Soda's bruised face. The arrogant bully cursed their very bloodline. Why was your pathetic family even born? Then, Tokuto noticed the boy's eyes. The defiant stare ignited his fury. The main character pushed himself off the dirt. Unfathomable rage blazed in his pupils. "Know your place, incompetent trash," Tokuto roared. A merciless barrage of blows rained down. Bone cracked. Blood flew. But amidst the brutal beating, an epiphany struck Soda. His father had changed the day his mother fell. The legendary hero had transformed into a demon. He plunged into the abyss like a madman. He threw his life away before speaking a single word of farewell. But there had to be a reason. A hidden truth beneath the madness. Soda lay paralyzed in a pool of his own blood. Iron fingers clamped around his collar once more. Tokuto dragged him upward. The tyrant offered a sinister promise. He would beat strength into the boy. He would succeed where the useless parents failed. The air pressure violently shifted. A glowing emerald portal ripped through space. Soda gasped in sheer horror. A genuine gate stood before them. The tormentor smirked with arrogant pride. He claimed the discovery as his own. This abyss would be their brutal training ground. A trembling lackey questioned the deadly risk. Tokuto shot the coward a lethal glare. He offered a ruthless ultimatum: walk through the portal, or suffer his wrath right here. The arrogant prodigy scoffed at the emerald glow. He mocked the portal's low rank. His elite squad had crushed purple realms before. But a primal dread seized Soda's heart. His knuckles turned white as he clenched his fists. In a flash of motion, Tokuto drew his weapon. A razor-sharp arrow locked onto Soda. The deadly projectile fired. It violently grazed the boy's cheek. Blood trickled down his skin. "Stop your pathetic whining!" Tokuto hissed. The next shaft would pierce his comatose mother's heart. Blind fury surged through the main character. His teeth nearly shattered from the pressure, but he was utterly powerless. He stepped forward. The squad marched into the emerald abyss. The spatial rift swallowed them whole. They descended into the monster's lair. The cursed vision activated instantly. Grotesque specters swarmed the shadows. Only Soda could perceive their terrifying forms. Panic choked him. Without warning, a blistering orb of pure fire materialized. It rocketed straight for his skull. His muscles locked in absolute terror. His mind went entirely blank. The main character shut his eyes. He braced for agonizing death. A heavy boot shattered the magical blaze. Embers scattered like dying stars. Stop cowering like a weakling. Tokuto barked. He spat venomous insults. What a monumental disgrace to the strongest flame master. The tyrant's patience had completely vanished. He was disgusted by the boy's mere existence. "Your life is entirely meaningless," he snarled. The killing intent in his eyes was absolute. A torrent of vile curses struck Soda's soul. Tokuto desecrated the fallen hero's name. "Your father was a monstrous coward. He abandoned his dying wife. He died like a stray dog in the dirt. It was all for nothing." The venom dripped from his words. He mocked the boy's lineage. He spat upon a father who chased glory over his own blood. Tokuto stepped closer. His smile was cruel. "Perish in these catacombs," he whispered. "Go join your pathetic father in the afterlife. Just rot here and die." The malice cut deep. Tears blurred Soda's vision. The entire world looked down on him. Even the ancient spirits of the tomb seemed to whisper in absolute mockery. Yet, was it truly mockery? A sudden chill ran down his spine. His breath hitched in absolute shock. He frantically searched the shadows. The flickering flames seemed alive. A voice echoed from the fire. "Open your eyes. Listen closely." He stood completely frozen in awe. The impossible was real. The flames were speaking directly to his soul. The arrogant bully demanded to know what he was looking at, but the words died in his throat. Crimson blood erupted from his lips. A massive blade of bone had impaled Tokuto from the shadows. His followers gasped in absolute terror. Webbing ensnared the tyrant. He was violently hoisted into the abyss. A colossal shadow descended. The queen spider, the apex predator of this lethal red gate. She claims the most vital flesh for her nest. She paralyzes her victims. She injects her brood to feed on them from the inside out. A fate far worse than death. A living incubator doomed to endless agony. And whatever remains becomes a feast for the swarm. The cowards scattered like insects. They abandoned the boy to the darkness. Soda stood alone with the ghostly flame. A sea of monstrous eyes encircled them. A grotesque spawn crawled forward. Its mandibles clicked with vile hunger. It saw only weak flesh. "Is this my grave?" His mind screamed in terror. But his spirit refused to break. He would not die here. The blazing soul commanded him, "Do not surrender. Sharpen your senses. Feel the world around you. You are ready to perceive the truth." The words were a mystery. Yet Soda anchored his soul to that singular beacon of hope. A blinding light shattered the darkness. A majestic system window materialized. The threshold of suffering had been shattered. The tomb recognized his will. A sacred notification echoed in his mind. The blessing of the catacombs, had awakened a dormant power. The divine art was revealed. Legacy Anomaly of the Wandering Souls. What power is this? The ethereal flame erupted. It expanded into a towering inferno of silver light. He dropped to his knees in reverence. The roaring fire shifted. It molded into a familiar, imposing figure, his father. The phantom extended a hand. Without hesitation, Soda reached back. The demonic swarm shrieked. The tide of monsters lunged to tear them apart. But time froze. Father and son locked hands. A catastrophic shockwave obliterated the cavern. The arachnid horde was reduced to ash. Divine fire surged through his veins. A boundless, terrifying strength awakened within his core. The ultimate truth of the anomaly was unlocked. He possessed the divine right to claim the legacy of departed legends. The legendary hellfire now answered to him. The exact power his father once wielded. He was no longer a victim. He had ascended. He was finally an awakened. The sheer magnitude of destiny crashed over him. Tears of raw power streamed down his face. The ancient spirit felt the tremble of his soul. "Brace yourself," the spirit roared. "There is no time to weep." The cavern walls shook. A second wave of nightmares descended. His mind struggled to grasp his new reality. "Power is nothing without vision," the ghostly voice reprimanded him. "Focus your intent. See the unseen. Read the flow of combat." He silenced his fear. Golden fire ignited within his very pupils. The world slowed. He saw the beast gathering vile energy deep within its maw. A fraction of a second later, venom struck empty air. He moved like a phantom. The spirit praised his insight. You witnessed the very pulse of its soul. The absolute secret of this world was unveiled. Every technique, every beast, every god among men. Their absolute strength is born from the soul. Predicting that lethal strike was not luck, it was the divine clairvoyance of his new lineage. A foul beast locked its gaze upon him. It launched itself like a fired cannon. He stood his ground. He calculated its pathetic lifespan. Deadly venom pooled in its fangs. But his leg moved like a thunderbolt. He shattered its jaw before a single drop could fall. He stared at his own trembling hands in absolute awe. He launched into the air. His fist collided with the beast like a meteor. The monster crumpled into the dirt. The realization struck him. He was a warrior. The mystery unraveled. Two souls bound as one. The martial mastery of a legendary father now flowed directly into the instincts of his son. A towering presence stood at his back. He felt phantom hands adjusting his stance. The overwhelming might of a veteran guided his every strike. Hot tears of gratitude burned his eyes. Fear shattered into a million pieces. Unshakable confidence roared to life. He stepped forward. His fiery fist annihilated another beast. Death loomed from his blind spot. A lethal blast surged toward his spine, but his instincts were divine. He vanished like smoke, leaving the attack to strike stone. The inferno in his gaze burned brighter. He analyzed his prey with absolute predatory focus. A distinct glowing flaw pulsed before him. "Is that the core?" he demanded. He did not wait for an answer. He vaulted into the abyss. His blazing strike pierced straight through the glowing weakness. He landed with absolute grace. The demonic creature shrieked in death agony. Searing hellfire devoured it from the inside out. A final nightmare approached. It towered over him. But it stopped. It felt the crushing pressure of an apex predator. The beast turned and fled in absolute terror. There is no escape. He raised his hand. Scorching mana violently compressed. "Prison blaze!" A pillar of catastrophic fire erupted, instantly cremating the coward. Silence reclaimed the blood-stained cavern. He exhaled a long breath of steam. The trial was conquered. "An acceptable display for your first slaughter," the spirit praised. The spirit's tone turned solemn. "The true trial begins now. Connect with the departed. Listen to the tragic echoes of your father's final regrets. You must shatter the chains of his past. Only then will his legendary power truly become yours. This is the absolute law of the anomaly." A dark suspicion crept into his mind. The knowledge was far too deep. Just what was the true identity of this ancient, blazing entity? The system coldly dismissed his questions. It claimed Soda remained trapped in a half-awakened trance. His mortal eyes could only grasp fractured glimpses of the spiritual realm. But his latent powers had finally bloomed. The barrier between worlds shattered at last. He could speak to the dead. A spectral figure materialized in the gloom. It was his father. A gentle smile graced the phantom's face. Immense the pride radiated from his ethereal form. His voice echoed through the deathly silence. He whispered that it had been far too long. Our main character stood paralyzed. Words utterly failed him. Before he could speak, the phantom raised a hand. His father offered a heavy, solemn apology. But Soda unleashed his pent-up rage. He demanded the brutal truth. Why did he abandon their family? Why did he leave her behind? His father's ghostly eyes darkened. He confessed his desperate crusade. He left to secure her salvation. The revelation struck like a physical blow. A monstrous queen spider had poisoned her veins. Her survival demanded an impossible cure. He needed the beast's venomous fangs. This was his grim mission. He had plunged headfirst into every crimson gate that spawned. It was a relentless suicide march. Pure, unadulterated madness. Victory was finally within his grasp, but a lethal snare sealed his doom. Soda stood completely paralyzed by the tragic truth. The spectral father pressed on. He confessed his blind obsession. He had pushed everyone away. He plunged into endless bloody raids alone. Yet, the explanation did not quench the burning fury in Soda's heart. Blazing wrath consumed him. His father had shouldered the crushing burden in secret. They were a family bound by blood. He should never have fought alone. Soda acknowledged his own devastating weakness. He was frail. He was powerless. But his father could have shared the agony. He could have just spoken to him. Absolute silence descended upon the phantom. Unshakable resolve ignited within Soda's eyes. The torch was passed. He declared he would be the one to save her life. A sacred vow escaped his lips. He would eclipse the legendary player standing before him. Death would claim no one else on his watch. He would ascend as the absolute strongest diver in existence. Immense pride swelled within the fallen warrior. The fragile boy was gone. A formidable man now stood in his place. Ethereal arms wrapped around the boy. He poured out his eternal love and pride. It was his final farewell. He purged every lingering regret from his soul. His parting words echoed with absolute command. He ordered his son to conquer the pinnacle of power. Then, the phantom fractured. His form shattered into countless drifting spheres of light. He entrusted their future to his heir. He charged him to protect her at all costs. Tears flowed as Soda offered his deepest, final gratitude. Suddenly, reality warped. A glowing azure interface materialized. It mirrored the very moment his destiny first awakened. The eternal regrets of Kichiro Suzaki had been erased. The ultimate inheritance was complete. Radiant Blaze was unlocked. He now commanded absolute dominion over roaring flames. Solitude reclaimed the cavern. Hot tears of triumph cascaded down Soda's face. Suddenly, a chaotic cackle shattered the silence. The Crimson Spirit mocked his tears. It ridiculed his arrogant vow to surpass a legend. But deep respect laced its mocking tone. It confessed its ultimate misjudgment. The spineless coward it once knew was dead. Soda offered a sincere bow of gratitude. But the infernal being scoffed. It forcefully rejected his noble display. Formalities completely disgusted the entity. A strange familiarity hovered between them. They were bound by something far deeper than mere chance. Suspicion ignited within Soda's mind. He demanded the truth. What was the true identity of this burning soul? Was it a ghost from his past? The entity opened its fiery maw to speak. Instantly, the fabric of reality shuddered. Violent static corrupted its voice. The words twisted into incomprehensible noise. It desperately forced the words out. But the cosmic interference only worsened. The spiritual frequency was shattering. A devastating silence swallowed the crucial truth. It roared with all its blazing might. But the absolute laws of the system gagged it. The revelation remained locked away. The system condemned its explanation as a lethal anomaly. Defeated, the spirit scoffed. It commanded Soda to forge a temporary name for it. It demanded a title of magnificent glory. Soda pondered for a brief second. He uttered the name Tamao. The blazing spirit froze in utter disbelief. Absolute disgust radiated from its flames. It viciously mocked his dreadful lack of taste. Soda offered a pathetic defense. The name simply popped into his head. He reminded the entity of its own careless terms. It had granted him absolute naming rights. The proud spirit let out a heavy, defeated sigh. The logic was flawless. The dreadful title was permanently etched into stone. Then, the spirit's tone shifted. It warned him of a lingering threat that demanded immediate action. A jolt of shock coursed through our main character. But panic quickly vanished. His gaze sharpened into lethal focus. A ruthless strategy was already forming. The infernal spirit watched with quiet approval. That deadly aura suited him perfectly. They marched toward the shadowy threshold. The spirit offered a profound parting truth. To bridge the gap between worlds once more, he merely needed to step back into the abyss. He breached the catacomb's edge. Beyond the emerald portal, terror still reigned. Takuto's pathetic hounds were choking on their own breath. Fear had pushed them to their absolute limits. Madness gnawed at their minds. How could a demonic arachnid spawn within a low-level domain? No answers surfaced, only suffocating dread. Without warning, the portal erupted. A blinding, violent luminescence scorched the air. The thugs scrambled backward in sheer paralyzing horror. Ominous halos manifested around the swirling vortex. The devastating truth was laid bare. This was no ordinary dungeon. It was a catastrophic anomaly. Confusion paralyzed one of the trembling fools. The hierarchy of dungeons was an absolute law. Colors dictated the boundary between life and death. Crimson, amber, violet, azure, and emerald. A single glance was all it took to measure the threat. The system was never supposed to lie. But spectral rings shattered all logic. The threat level had skyrocketed to apocalyptic heights. Crony number 1 stared into the abyss with unblinking terror. His voice trembled with raw despair. He whispered the forbidden question. Had they just blindly charged into a crimson hell? Absolute panic seized their souls. How could they possibly report this catastrophe? Confessing meant admitting to a highly illegal breach. Worse yet, they had ruthlessly assaulted an innocent. Guilt and terror collided. One thug muttered a grim truth. Their fallen leader had merely reaped his deadly karma. But the second lackey froze. Soda was still inside. Silence fell. They scoffed. A forgotten pawn. No one would search for him. The vanishing of a single weakling meant nothing. Then, the air warped. The emerald gate groaned open. Soda emerged. His steps were eerily calm. "Forgive my past weakness," he murmured. The lackeys stared. This was not the boy they knew. How did he survive? The thought paralyzed them. Suddenly, infernal flames ignited within Soda's eyes. The second lackey demanded answers. But our main character simply observed. Compared to the demonic spiders of the abyss, these men were nothing. Mere insects. The wretched coward pointed a trembling finger. He blamed Soda for Takuto's demise. Even his companion gasped at the sheer audacity. The fool chose the easiest path. Pin the sin on the survivor. But Soda's patience had vanished. Annoyance gripped him. His voice cut through the tension. He demanded to speak with Katura. Katura stood utterly bewildered. Humiliated, the lackey erupted in rage. He threw a vicious strike. Soda remained as still as a mountain. Soda reacted with terrifying speed. His fist connected first. A devastating blow crushed into his foe's face. The coward was launched through the air. He crashed into the earth. The survivor stood paralyzed. Had Soda awakened? His monstrous power was undeniable. Soda turned his piercing gaze to Katura. He issued a command. Drenched in cold sweat, the trembling man obeyed. Together, they descended back into the abyss. Despair clawed at Kutura's soul. He knew the grim truth. Death awaited them both. But Soda spoke of destiny. An irregular gate had manifested. This was their sole chance. Hesitation would spell eternal doom. Absolute certainty radiated from our main character. He would slaughter the queen spider. Katura gasped in pure horror. This suicidal mission was planned? He begged for reinforcements. Before another word escaped his lips, a booming roar shattered the silence. "Halt your steps!" A terrifying presence materialized. Soda and Katura spun around. A chill ran down their spines. An imposing figure blocked the path. Supreme arrogance oozed from his stance. The way forward was sealed. Not as long as he drew breath. Who dares tread these forbidden grounds? Speak your purpose. Soda and Katura stared at the unknown warrior. They demanded his identity. He sneered in absolute disgust. His name belonged to the worthy, not to lurking shadows. Soda attempted to reason. The warrior's hand sliced through the air. Silence was enforced. His sharp gaze locked onto Soda. He recognized the fallen boy, the one found senseless beyond the threshold. The laws of the catacomb were absolute. A party of 3 was mandatory. Yet only 2 stood before him. Suspicion morphed into hostile intent. Execution seemed imminent. Aura surged from the stranger's body. Punishment was ready. Soda tried to speak the truth, but the man's fist clenched tight. "I demand obedience, not words," he roared. The warrior charged with explosive speed, a lethal strike aimed at Soda's head, but Soda vanished. He slipped past the blow. Peace was no longer an option. Soda pivoted sharply. He unleashed a devastating uppercut. The impact was completely absorbed. The Titan merely smirked. "Impressive speed," he mocked. Then he invoked his innate art, Man of Steel. Flesh transformed into impenetrable iron. His fists gleamed with metallic malice. One strike would shatter mortal bones. Soda sensed the overwhelming disparity in strength. An absolute defense. Engaging him meant certain death. Survival instincts took over. Soda spun on his heel. He dashed into the darkness. Katura was left trembling in the beast's shadow. A furious roar echoed through the cavern. "Face me, coward! Our clash was destined to be legendary." Panic snapped Katura awake. He bolted after his leader. The steel titan stalked the shadows. His taunts echoed off the cold stone walls. They sought refuge in a pitch-black crevice. Their breathing was completely suppressed. A direct confrontation was suicidal. The timing was entirely wrong. Bare fists would shatter against his iron skin. Unleashing pyromancy was equally foolish. It would only burn the very oxygen they breathed. Suddenly, an eerie light manifested. An emerald flame spirit floated before Soda. The phantom recognized the armored tyrant outside. Tuma. The very name reeked of arrogance. The spirit hissed in pure hatred. Tuma's presence had broken its eternal slumber. Vengeance was finally at hand. Intrigued, Soda questioned their blood-stained past. The phantom recoiled in utter disbelief. A mortal could perceive its spectral form? Soda met its gaze without flinching. "I see everything now." A tale of ancient rivalry began. Decades of boiling hatred. A blood feud that transcended lifetimes. They clashed in a duel to the death. But the spirit had fallen. Defeat turned to an agonizing demise. His soul was chained to this desolate tomb. Eternal torment consumed him. The humiliation was unbearable. Rest was completely impossible. Not while his murderer walked free. A pact was forged in the shadows. Soda swore to become the blade of vengeance. Armed with unyielding resolve, he stepped out to confront the steel titan. Tuma grinned with savage delight. His prey had finally emerged. Laughter shook the cavern walls. Then Soda spoke. "Igarashi Tuma." The titan froze instantly. Dread poisoned Tuma's veins. How did this weakling know his true name? Soda drew his fist back. "My apologies," he whispered. Suddenly, emerald lightning tore from the heavens. The divine thunder crashed down. Unimaginable agony surged through Tuma's steel body. The invincible titan was brought to his knees. Soda towered over the fallen warrior. The verdant flame emerged from his core. It danced in glorious triumph. The spectral debt had finally been paid. The chains of his past finally shattered. It was time to march forward. Soda offered his solemn farewells. He finally understood. Every soul bears the weight of untold sorrow. The Azure system flickered to life. A new power surged through his veins. Skill inherited. Stun. A devastating burst of raw lightning, ready to obliterate foes in a single heartbeat. Stepping from the shadows, Katura found him. His eyes widened in absolute shock. The towering Tuma had fallen, crushed beneath Soda's overwhelming might. Soda's cold gaze pierced through him. Why stay when you could flee? Katura swallowed hard. He still grasped for answers. Why was he dragged into this nightmare to begin with? The truth was finally unveiled. Soda required his unique gift. The Poison Master skill. Absolute dominion over lethal toxins. Soda had witnessed it himself. With the right catalysts, Katura could forge miraculous antidotes to cheat death itself. That salvation was etched into his memory. Katura braced himself. What was his grand purpose? The main character's eyes burned with unyielding resolve. He would annihilate the Queen Spider. He needed the Poison Master's unparalleled arts. It was the only way to pull his mother back from the abyss. Bloodshed was not required of him. Yet, Katura chose the path of war. He made a single, desperate plea. Save Takuto from the jaws of fate. Deep gratitude poured from his soul. Soda had pulled him from death's door countless times. He had sparked his ultimate awakening. You are my absolute savior. But Soda's expression turned to ice. The request was instantly denied. Forgiveness for that traitor would never see the light of day. However, he granted one sliver of mercy. Katura could rescue Takuto by his own hands. Soda would face the colossal beast alone. Silence hung heavy in the air. He vowed not to block his path. A faint smile graced Katura's lips. Then, The earth trembled. The paralyzed giant, Tuma, violently broke free from his chains of lightning. Panic seized their hearts, but the looming threat vanished in an instant. Tuma wrapped them both in a bone-crushing embrace. Their unwavering bond moved him to the brink of tears. Bewilderment washed over them. Yet, the undeniable truth remained. 3 warriors now stood united in the depths of this cursed catacomb. The giant scoffed. The truth should have been laid bare from the beginning. Our main character fired back. A blind attack requires no explanation. Tuma offered his strength to save her, but shadows of doubt clouded Soda's mind. The peril ahead was astronomical, a dance with pure death. But Tuma's spirit burned like a furnace. Backing down was never in his blood. This path was his own unwavering choice. Suddenly the cavern walls shrieked. A nightmare materialized from the darkness. The ravenous queen spider had descended. The hour of judgment had arrived. Retreat was an illusion. A feral grin stretched across Tuma's face, his fists forged into indestructible steel. The vanguard was locked and ready for war. A mountainous monstrosity loomed above them. The queen spider gnashed her venomous fangs. She hungered to consume their very souls. Tension choked the damp air. Kutura sought a glimmer of hope. Just how deep had the steel giant conquered within these wretched catacombs? The purple gates were merely stepping stones. But the crimson glow of a red gate? That was an uncharted abyss. This was a legendary trial, and he would unleash every ounce of his power. The living shield took his stance, but a sudden movement shattered their expectations. Soda strode to the front line. He stood defiantly against the Leviathan alone. A terrifying aura of absolute resolve erupted. This beast would be eradicated. The blood of his fallen parents demanded nothing less. The earth quaked. The colossal apex predator lunged forward with blinding fury. Yet, Soda danced through the jaws of death. His movements flowed like a master of war. A massive web rained down like a guillotine. Without a flinch, he vaulted straight into the deadly trap. The rear guard was left breathless. Absolute awe paralyzed their mortal frames. The main character exuded the presence of a god, as if the hellish red gates were merely his playground. But Kutura knew the cold, hard truth. Such impossible mastery defied logic. His awakening was but a few hours old. Yet, he moved like an ancient warlord. Suddenly, the cavern temperature skyrocketed. Scorching infernos ignited from his bare fists. Disbelief shattered Tuma's composure. Fire magic? His true strength had been sealed away. That single revelation ignited a roaring fire within the giant's soul. Defeat was simply not an option. The man of steel skill roared to life. His massive fists hardened into an unbreakable bastion of metal. He unleashed a cataclysmic blow against the towering beast, a strike fueled by sheer, unrelenting will. Yet, his heart stopped cold. The absolute defense remained entirely unscratched. His supreme attack was reduced to nothing but dust. The true horror had already crept into his blind spot. The venomous maw hung wide open, prepared to sever his head in a single snap. Time froze. The cold scythe of death brushed against his neck. But a blazing comet descended from the heavens. Soda crashed into the beast's skull. Divine punishment unleashed. Electric shock. Stun. Violent emerald lightning tore through the abyss. It struck the Leviathan with the wrath of a thunderstorm. Yet, the monstrosity's armor was virtually impenetrable. The godlike lightning merely tickled the beast. Panic threatened to consume them. A desperate strategy was forged in the heat of battle. Tuma must become the supreme bait, while Soda readies his blazing inferno. Fear held no dominion over the giant. A flawless stratagem for survival. He forged his entire mortal vessel into pure, unyielding steel. The ultimate overdrive mode engaged. He stood as an immovable mountain against the creeping death. The monstrous queen hissed in pure frustration. Her deadly fangs met an unbreakable wall. A deafening roar of defiance echoed. Tuma demanded the monster strike with true killing intent. But time was a cruel master. His ironclad invincibility was rapidly bleeding away. A single opening was all they had. The enraged Leviathan unhinged its filthy jaws. It dove straight into the fatal snare. The trap was perfectly sprung. Vaulting from the iron giant's shoulders, Soda tore through the sky like a meteor. Searing purgatory engulfed his strike. Flower flame, an explosive pillar of fire shattered the beast's leg. A demonic shriek ruptured the cavern. Scorching agony forced the Leviathan back into the shadows. The infernal weakness had finally been exposed. The trio pushed their absolute limits. Awe struck Kutura's soul. These two warriors were fighting like mythical gods. The impossible victory was finally within their grasp. Now, the burden of destiny fell upon his shoulders. He must pull Takuto from the abyss. He surged into the darkness. But a chilling omen dropped directly at his feet. A solitary, discarded shoe. The solitary shoe told an absolute devastating truth. It belonged to Takuto. The monstrous queen was already feasting upon his shattered lower half. A guttural, soul-crushing scream ripped violently from Katura's throat. He charged blindly into the abyss. His weapon raised for a desperate final strike, but the monstrosity lifted a massive, razor-sharp limb. It descended like a guillotine, halting mere inches from his face. Tuma lunged forward to intercept the fatal blow. The venomous spike ruthlessly impaled his back instead. His hardened steel armor violently shattered. Fragments rained upon the stone floor like broken glass. Was my absolute defense truly that fragile? Soda wasted no time. He moved like a flash of lightning. He dashed toward the beast to rescue his fallen comrades, but a colossal, armored leg intercepted his path. The sheer kinetic force slammed his body brutally against the cavern wall. He collapsed against the cold, unyielding stone. In an instant, inescapable silk bound him tight. The apex predator slithered closer, hoisting him into the air like a helpless sacrifice. Its foul, venom-dripping jaws unhinged. Absolute death stared him straight in the face. Yet, this was the exact trap he had carefully orchestrated. He welcomed the terrifying proximity. Feigning unconsciousness, he summoned his inner heat. Searing flames secretly incinerated his silken prison. Tuma watched the brilliant deception in pure awe. Snatching a jagged shard of fallen armor, Soda struck. He drove the cold steel brutally into the beast's multiple terrifying eyes. As the blade sank deep into grotesque flesh, his aura violently erupted. A devastating wave of lightning surged from his palm. He channeled high-voltage fury directly into its nervous system. His free hand ignited into a roaring inferno. He delivered a cataclysmic punch straight into its cavernous maw. Searing fire incinerated the monster from the inside out. One final, violent tremor seized its massive frame. The monstrous queen collapsed into lifeless ruin. Through tactical brilliance and shattered steel, absolute victory was claimed. The path to his mother's salvation was finally clear. Across the blood-stained chamber, solemn silence fell. Tuma and Katura stood mourning over Takuto's mangled corpse. Devastating sorrow crushed Katura entirely. Tears of utter disbelief streamed down his face. Tuma stepped forward with quiet respect, offering to carry the fallen warrior home. The veteran fighter then turned his commanding gaze toward Soda. He offered profound praise for slaughtering the legendary queen. Yet, the young hero humbly shook his head. He declared the victory utterly impossible without his allies' sacrifice. Tuma stood utterly astonished by such rare humility. A single hunter possessing multiple awakened skills defied the laws of reality. Furthermore, that electric shock carried a deeply despised signature. Without hesitation, Soda confessed the power belonged to Gu. He expressed a solemn desire to pay respects at his grave. A chilling silence instantly gripped Tuma. There was no grave to visit. The lightning user was still drawing breath. Pure bewilderment struck the main character's face. Tuma swore on his honor he had crossed paths with him just yesterday. The undeniable truth hung heavily in the air. A paralyzing shockwave of disbelief hit him hard. Without warning, agonizing pain violently fractured his skull. An ancient, blazing voice echoed from the depths of his soul. You have brushed against the very foundation of reality. A buried fragment of time violently forced its way up. A blinding vision struck his mind like a physical blow. An unfamiliar classroom bathed in light, a mysterious girl standing quietly by his side. His consciousness instantly shattered, plunging him into the abyss. As the crushing darkness eagerly swallowed his mind, the spirit's majestic voice pierced the void. His mother was not the only soul bound to his tragic destiny. Within the sterile white hospital walls, an intense interrogation began. Tuma demanded to know if this arrogant face matched the phantom from the catacombs. The main character offered a solemn nod of absolute confirmation. The apocalyptic battle against the arachnid was over. Yet, the bitter hostility between these two proud warriors fiercely raged on. Tuma launched a brutal barrage of mocking insults. He questioned if this vicious-looking man was merely an evil twin. I share my bloodline with no one, Go snapped back with venom. The veteran accepted this arrogant declaration. The man's insufferable, entitled aura proved his identity flawlessly. Their childish war of words escalated dramatically. They completely ignored the sacred silence of the healing grounds. Soda had to forcibly intervene to extinguish their blazing tempers before a crowd gathered. A tense silence finally subdued the two bickering alphas. Soda quickly shifted the focus to the lingering threat. Was the dimensional rift truly sealed and eternally stabilized? Both seasoned warriors confirmed absolute victory without a shred of hesitation. Every inch of the dungeon had been meticulously inspected. The annihilation of a realm's master dictates its total collapse. The lingering shadows of monstrous invasion were entirely erased. Soda offered deep gratitude to the two elites. With the world secured, he turned his steps toward his injured companion. Watching his retreating back, heavy suspicion filled Gao's eyes. Did that sheer novice truly butcher the Abyss Monarch alone? Tuma answered with absolute, unshakable certainty. A Red Gate calamity had been slaughtered by a mere rookie. Pure, paralyzing shock gripped his former rival. The mythical concept of inheriting phantom abilities was no longer a fairy tale. It was a godlike arsenal, fueled by terrifying battle instincts and unbreakable willpower. A brilliant spark ignited within the veteran's strategic mind. This monstrous talent absolutely had to be recruited. He turned to demand a crucial favor, but absolute refusal instantly met his words. The fragile peace shattered in a single second. Their explosive, roaring conflict fiercely erupted all over again. Beneath the quiet night sky, critical work relentlessly continued. Katura meticulously butchered the arachnid's venom glands. The complex alchemy was nearing perfection. A miracle cure was mere moments away from reality. He looked up, his exhausted eyes laced with deep concern for his savior. How was the young warrior recovering from that terrifying blackout? A warm expression of profound gratitude bridged the space between them. I barely suffered a scratch compared to your heroic sacrifice, the alchemist humbly confessed. Crippling guilt forced a heavy apology from his trembling lips. He believed himself to be a pathetic burden. Soda instantly shattered that devastating illusion. When cherished lives face annihilation, even the strongest souls tremble in fear. The phantom memory of his beloved parents powerfully flashed in his mind. Though the fallen warrior walked a vastly different path, he held zero affection for the arrogant fool. Yet, to his ally, that life held immeasurable weight. That sacred bond demanded ultimate respect. I could never match your monstrous resolve, the grieving alchemist whispered. A puzzled frown etched itself onto the hero's exhausted face. Before the mystery could unravel, a brilliant glow illuminated the dark. The legendary elixir of life was finally complete. The master of toxins had achieved the impossible. Katura thrust the vial into Soda's hands. He urged him to run. Time was running out. Our main character bowed his head in profound gratitude. He sprinted toward the hospital room. His lungs burned. His muscles screamed. Salvation rested within his palms. This fragile vial held the power over life and death. His mother lay motionless, a fragile shell on the brink of oblivion. He tilted her head. The divine elixir flowed past her pale lips. A single fateful swallow. A blinding, ethereal light erupted from her core. Slowly, her heavy eyelids fluttered open. The deadly curse was shattered. The moment her gaze met his, Soda felt his heart violently clench. Hot tears cascaded down his face. The agony of waiting was finally over. She recognized her beloved son. She marveled at the powerful young warrior he had become. A torrent of suppressed emotion finally broke. They wept together. It was a reunion forged in the fires of an eternity apart. The shadow of a fallen hero loomed over them. They spoke of his father. What were his final thoughts? Soda spoke the absolute truth. Saving her was his father's ultimate dying wish. The burden of legacy was passed down. His father had entrusted everything to his son. His deepest emotions, his overwhelming power, his unbreakable will, even the legendary Kiro Flames. A heavy gasp escaped his mother's lips. This revelation carried a terrifying omen. Her voice trembled with dread. What path would he walk now? The fateful mission was complete. Soda froze. Her question pierced his very soul. What lay beyond this victory? But deep within his beating heart, the inevitable answer had already taken root. He would ascend to the absolute pinnacle. He would become the strongest dungeon diver in existence. He swore to end this era of death, but those words shattered his mother's fleeting peace. He looked into her terrified eyes. Would she stand against his destiny? She offered no comforting lies. Her rejection was absolute and immediate. The agonizing image of his death tormented her. Her chest tightened with suffocating grief. Yet, she understood the cruel truth. His parents had forged this tragic destiny for him. Even so, she surrendered to his burning resolve. She could not chain a dragon to the earth. A rare, genuine flush warmed Soda's cheeks. She bound him to a single, absolute vow. He must shield his own life above all else. If the abyss claimed him, her shattered soul would never recover. Soda swore a sacred oath. He would defy death itself. They locked into a desperate embrace. Two survivors clinging to a fragile ember of warmth. The fragmented family was finally whole. Time seemed to stand still. But as Soda stepped into the cold corridor, a subtle presence alerted his heightened senses. Tuma and Katura lingered in the shadows. They hastily wiped away their treacherous tears. They masked their overwhelming emotion. The entire sacred exchange had been witnessed. Tuma confessed their silent intrusion. Soda dismissed it with a heavy sigh. The emotional storm had passed, but a monstrous threat still loomed on the horizon. A forbidden catacomb had been breached. The laws of the realm were absolute. How would they face the wrath of the association? Tuma smirked with unbreakable confidence. The invisible hand of his faction was already moving. The crisis was erased. Then, he extended a fateful invitation. To conquer the absolute summit, to become the supreme dungeon diver. Their banner offered the quickest path to unimaginable power. Miles away, deep within a sinister yellow gate, a lone figure advanced. He crushed the mangled corpses of monstrous beasts beneath his heavy boots. He murmured an apology to the darkness. Tuma had broken the chain of command. His words reached an imposing figure, a white-haired monarch, seated upon a towering throne of slaughtered nightmares. The white-haired ruler merely scoffed. The insubordination meant nothing. A dangerous glint flashed in his eyes. He too hunted a specific prey, a boy known as Soda Suzaki. In this brutal world, a team is no mere club. It is an official military strike force, sanctioned by the association to annihilate catacombs and slaughter monstrous kings. To put it simply, they are the executioners of the abyss. Under the brilliant midday sun, Tuma puffed out his chest with sheer pride. He revealed his allegiance to a legendary faction, the almighty Tenro. Katura gasped in sudden awe. Tenro was not just a national powerhouse. It was an absolute titan, a global superpower standing at the apex of human strength. 10 elite divisions formed its iron spine, squads 1 through 10, each commanded by a terrifying warlord, and towering above these monsters, the supreme commander-in-chief ruled with an iron fist. Tuma struck Katura's back with a booming laugh. He praised the Poison Master's encyclopedic knowledge. A ghost from the past surfaced. Takuto had worshipped the Tenro banner. He had bled and trained in endless solitude, dreaming of one day earning their sacred crest. The weight of the memory silenced Tuma. Soda finally broke the heavy quiet. He, too, knew the legends. The supreme ruler of this mighty empire, the man known as Yamato Sumeragi. He had crushed apocalyptic disasters across the globe, an unstoppable force of nature. The association had crowned him with the absolute title, the strongest. Soda envisioned standing before such a titan, awe-warred with determination in his mind. Katura questioned if fear gripped the young warrior. Soda violently shook his head. Fear had no place in his soul. Only a burning, overwhelming gratitude remained. This was his gateway to absolute power. A feral grin split Tuma's face. The boy possessed the heart of a lion. Their footsteps finally halted. They stood before the fortress of legends. A dilapidated ancient estate greeted them, a masterclass in deception. Tuma warned them not to trust their mortal eyes. A terrifying secret lay beneath the surface. The massive wooden doors groaned open. Reality violently shifted. An impossibly vast domain swallowed their vision. A hyper-advanced labyrinth of steel and neon, a fortress of absolute power. It shattered every mortal expectation. Tuma opened his mouth to boast, but a terrifying killing intent flared behind him. A merciless strike smashed into the back of his skull. An imposing enforcer loomed over him. He snarled with furious authority. Tuma had broken the sacred laws and dumped his chaotic aftermath onto the guild's shoulders. Tuma raised his guard and spat out his defense. He claimed he had Yamato's absolute blessing. But the assailant showed no mercy. Fists rained down like iron. This brutal executioner was his own flesh and blood. His older brother, each strike carried a bone-rattling thud. He interrogated Tuma mid-blow. Did he abandon his duties? Did he shove his massive burdens onto Goku of the second squad? The relentless punches demanded an answer. Reality struck Tuma like a poisoned blade. The memory of that mocking grin surfaced. The coward had not kept quiet. He had committed the ultimate betrayal. He had snitched to the one man Tuma feared. The violent dance continued without pause. Fists collided against flesh. Words cut through the tense air. The brothers traded savage blows and razor-sharp insults in equal measure. Soda stepped forward into the danger zone. He sought to break their brutal rhythm, but a chilling calm sliced through the chaos. The older brother spoke. He named Soda. He named Katura. His voice demanded absolute silence. He stood tall and declared his identity. Yusei Igarashi, the deputy commander-in-chief of Tenro, a titan of authority. Then, he lowered his head. He offered a deep, solemn bow to atone for his brother's reckless sins. He laid bare Tuma's true nature. A wild beast, a fool who charged blindly into the fray, a warrior completely deaf to reason and restraint. Our main character scrambled for words. He was a humble warrior, uncomfortable with such high reverence. He frantically waved off the apology. Tuma had been a vital shield in the darkness. Footsteps echoed through the grand hall. A commanding presence arrived. He scolded Yusei's iron grip on Tuma. The air instantly grew heavy. It was him, the sovereign of the catacombs, the phantom who perched upon mountains of slaughtered beasts, Yamato Sumeragi. His voice held a deceptive warmth. He defended the reckless brother. Tuma only sought to save lives. He was a righteous blade drawn for the innocent. He commanded Yusei to sheathe his wrath. Soda stood paralyzed. His mind raced with confusion. This was the Supreme Commander? He exuded no dread. He seemed dangerously ordinary. Soda observed the titans standing before him. Yamato lacked the towering mass of the Igarashi bloodline. But appearances deceive. Soda ignited his power. He pierced the veil of reality. He stared directly into their souls. Yusei's spirit blazed with majestic might. It easily dwarfed Tuma's fire. But Yamato? An absolute void. His soul whispered nothing. It felt hollow, insignificant, almost dead. Yamato shifted his gaze. His eyes locked onto Soda like a predator acknowledging its prey. He offered a warm greeting. He claimed he had eagerly awaited this fateful encounter. The Supreme Commander praised the anomaly. He marveled at Soda's divine sight. Our main character lowered his mental shields. This sovereign felt far too casual, too relaxed. Then, the atmosphere shattered. Yamato posed a chilling question. Did Soda crave the absolute pinnacle of power? He offered a glimpse into the abyss of true strength. Our main character accepted the dark invitation. Yusei opened his mouth to scream a warning. Yamato silenced him with a raised hand. He promised restraint. He swore no blood would be spilled, a terrifying reassurance. The die was cast. The final spark had ignited. Soda's eyes burned with unyielding resolve. The absolute thirst for battle consumed him. Yusei gritted his teeth. He surrendered to fate. He vowed to intervene only if death loomed. Yamato guided them into the proving grounds. Reality warped. The space fractured and rebuilt itself in a single breath. The shift was instantaneous. A masterstroke of divine manipulation. Soda's senses violently spun. His mind could not even comprehend the arcane distortion. Yamato lifted his left hand, a grim declaration of war. The first strike was coming. Soda reignited his mystical vision. His eyes flared with celestial fire. Survival demanded absolute focus. One mistake meant oblivion. Yamato possessed unimaginable martial arts. Soda scoured the sovereign's soul for a hint. Nothing. It remained an infinite, terrifying void. The void shattered. The atmosphere screamed. A blinding inferno of orange aura erupted from the supreme leader. Space compressed. Time stopped. Yamato materialized right before his eyes. The fist struck like a falling meteor. Devastation tore through Soda's flesh. He launched backward. He crashed violently into the reinforced steel. Tuma, Yusei, and Katura screamed his name in sheer terror. The fortress shuddered. Cracks spiderwebbed across the indestructible stone. Soda gasped for air. It felt like a warhead had detonated against his chest. His mind reeled. What demonic force was that? The void vanished. Yamato's soul finally took form, a colossal human silhouette of towering dread. Our main character dragged his broken body up. The terrifying truth struck him. This was no arcane skill. It was raw, unadulterated power, an ocean of primordial energy. Yamato stared down at his victim. He asked if the boy wished to face death again. The question triggered a primal awakening in Soda. Fear evaporated. Cowardice died. A monstrous thrill surged through his veins. The overwhelming disparity did not break him. It forged him. Inner fire roared to life. He forced his battered legs to stand. Yamato vanished again. A storm of lethal blows descended. But Soda shifted. He slipped barely past the Reaper's scythe. The Sovereign's eyes widened in mild shock. A mortal had defied the heavens. Fists rained down like artillery fire. Death approached from every angle. Yet, Soda danced through the absolute destruction. Reality remained grim. Defense was suicide. His bones would shatter upon impact. One graze, one solid connection. That would be his absolute end. Sight was no longer enough. The celestial eyes were too slow. He had to transcend his mortal limits. He had to merge with the battlefield. He had to feel the phantom currents of death. Every muscle tightened. Every nerve ending screamed. He used every ounce of his being to react. This was the pinnacle, a desperate clash against the absolute zenith of martial power. It was a divine blessing. Soda's blood boiled with savage ecstasy. The Sovereign pursued him without mercy. The pressure was suffocating. But Soda reveled in the glorious chaos. He never wanted it to end. The hunger completely consumed him. He craved the absolute abyss. Strike harder, move faster, abandon all mercy, unleash the true apocalypse. Yamato smiled. A predator enjoying the supreme hunt. Lethal kicks and apocalyptic punches tore through the air. Soda evaded them all. His flesh was bruised and battered. Yet, he pushed deeper into the bloody crucible he had chosen. Yusei stood utterly paralyzed. The sight defied all logic. A mere rookie surviving the wrath of a god. He felt a surge of profound respect for the boy's unbreakable courage. Tuma demanded his brother's judgment. Yusei did not scold him. A proud grin touched his lips. The crucible was working. The diamond was being forged flawlessly under unimaginable pressure. A dangerous spark ignited. Soda's clenched fist began to radiate light. Crimson embers danced around his knuckles. The temperature spiked. A catastrophic heat gathered in his palm. He locked eyes with the Supreme Sovereign. He made a daring demand. Could he shatter his own limits? Could he unleash his ultimate ruin? Yamato's casual demeanor cracked. A serious shadow fell over his face. The commander issued a chilling decree. This was no game. This was his realm of true slaughter, his strongest form. Asking for permission was an insult to the sacred battlefield. He commanded the boy to bring the apocalypse. Bring every ounce of his soul. Our main character grounded his stance. The final seal shattered. He prepared to unleash complete and utter devastation. The meteor launched. Soda's blazing fist tore through the void. A majestic explosion of fire erupted upon impact. The shockwave roared. Yamato's eyes expanded in absolute disbelief. The impossible stood before him. The flames bore a legendary signature. This martial art belonged to a ghost. The legacy of Shichiro Suzaki, the undisputed god of fire. The ancient flames resurrected buried memories. A forgotten thrill surged through Yamato's chest. The blood of the sovereign boiled once more. The golden era of bloodshed had finally returned. The Supreme Commander spoke. He praised Soda's unbreakable spirit, a rare acknowledgement of true courage. Hearing those words from an absolute legend brought tremendous relief. But no rest was granted. Our main character stood drenched in sweat. His breath was ragged. His stamina was completely drained. Yet the trial was far from over. Yamato slowly raised his right hand. The air itself began to tremble. A blinding orange aura erupted around his physical form. The Supreme Commander was ascending to an entirely new realm of power. Then the siren screamed. Blaring alarms shattered the tension. An emergency broadcast echoed through the cold steel halls. The perimeter had been breached. Blood ran cold. Complete silence fell over the room. A catastrophic outbreak had just decimated Sakurazawa town. Soda's muscles still screamed in agony from the hellish training. Yet the flames of war had already ignited. The thrill of battle instantly vanished from Yamato's eyes. The real nightmare had arrived. Their sparring session was abruptly terminated. A brutal reality check had taken its place. The absolute rule of the dungeons had been broken. When a boss survives a gate opening, hell follows. Monstrous hordes spill into the mortal realm to slaughter the innocent. Yamato's voice turned cold. He explained the grim truth. Gates near human settlements are never supposed to reach this critical stage. This disaster had a cause. Weak challengers had failed their mission. They ran out of time. Instantly taking command, the Supreme Leader seized control of the chaos. His voice demanded an answer. Which squads were prepared for absolute war? Teams 1, 2, and 5 responded. There was zero hesitation in their battle cries. Orders fell like lightning. Team 5 received their sacred duty. They would become the ultimate shield, escorting the fleeing civilians to absolute safety. Teams 1 and 2 were mobilized as the vanguard. They were ordered to fan out immediately, securing a deadly 5-kilometer perimeter around the ruins of Sakurazawa town. Their mission was absolute containment. Not a single beast could break the line. Meanwhile, the elite units of Yusa and Tuma would plunge straight into the jaws of the gate itself. Curiosity pushed through Soda's exhaustion. He asked the Supreme Commander for his personal objective. Yamato's answer was chilling. He would plunge directly into the slaughter, annihilating the scattered horde with his own 2 hands. A desperate fire ignited within Soda. He begged to join the vanguard. He needed to witness the terrifying majesty of true warfare. Yamato's gaze pierced right through his soul. The warning was absolute. Fall behind for even a second, and you will be abandoned to the shadows. Our hero did not flinch. His resolve was forged in iron. He accepted the brutal terms without a single breath of hesitation. Katura received his marching orders as well. He was bound to the front line. His sole purpose was to act as Soda's guardian angel in the coming slaughter. The commander's voice shattered the silence. The final decree was issued. The march to war begins now, and absolutely no one is permitted to die. They blitzed toward the epicenter of the massacre. Yamato and Soda shattered the wind with blistering speed. Katura gasped for air. The velocity of their advance was utterly inhuman. Dread clawed at Katura's heart. Soda was charging into a bloodbath with a broken body. Following that intense training, this suicidal pace was a death sentence. Yamato became a force of nature. He ripped through the monstrous horde, shattering skulls with devastating strikes. Glancing back, he saw Soda stumbling. The boy's limits were finally breaking. Had the commander demanded the impossible? Soda's legs finally betrayed him. He collapsed hard against the unforgiving earth. Katura sprinted to his fallen comrade. Panic stained his voice. Soda cursed his own frailty. Was this the moment to break? Was this the time to kneel? Terror gripped Katura's mind. This battlefield was a slaughterhouse. He firmly believed they were marching toward their own graves. The gap in power was simply too massive. Retreat seemed like the only logical choice. The legendary Tenro squad could handle this massacre alone. Soda possessed undeniable bravery, but his physical form was crumbling into dust. Katura screamed over the roaring chaos. Why suffer like this? Why push a shattered body past the absolute brink of destruction? The boy was already vastly superior to ordinary men. Stepping aside and letting the commander unleash his wrath was the safest path. Yet Soda fiercely rejected the shadows. His eyes burned with primordial defiance. Running away was an unforgivable sin. He refused to drown in the poison of future regrets. For the very first time, he seized control of his own destiny. He was not fighting to survive. He was fighting to ascend as the supreme apex predator. Surrender meant losing everything. It meant shattering the core of his very soul. His hollow lies were dead. Only absolute truth remained. His sole obsession was reaching Yamato's towering peak. Those fiery words struck Katura like thunder. Drawing a mysterious vial, he unleashed his forbidden poison alchemy. A miracle was forged in the heat of battle. He thrust the glowing elixir into Soda's trembling hands. The sudden weight almost slipped through the boy's exhausted fingers. It was a catalyst of absolute destruction, a temporary key to unlock monstrous, dormant power. But the dark backlash would be catastrophic. Katura did not hide the deadly truth. Soda locked his gaze on the sinister liquid. The battlefield roared around him. He took one final, grounding breath. To drink, or to die as a weakling. Ahead of them, Yamato was an unstoppable god of war. He crushed monsters into crimson mist. Suddenly, intelligence arrived over the comms. The inner catacombs were entirely desolate. The horrifying truth became absolute. The apex predator of the dungeon was no longer trapped. The boss was already hunting in the city streets. Their only desperate option was containment. They had to seal the gate before the horde consumed the world. Suddenly, the transmission was cut short. A towering, nightmarish ogre descended before the Supreme Commander. Yamato's eyes narrowed into deadly slits. Was this towering beast the fugitive king? If so, executing it would be a trivial matter. Then, a blinding streak of light shattered the darkness. Yamato gasped in pure shock. It was Soda. A roaring tempest of infernal flames engulfed his fist. He drove a cataclysmic strike right into the ogre's monstrous skull. The forbidden elixir had detonated within his veins. Soda's aura exploded into an unstoppable hurricane of power. Katura stood paralyzed in awe. Our hero smiled, throwing his gratitude to the alchemist. He had consumed the poison without a shred of hesitation, ignoring the impending doom of its side effects. The metamorphosis was instantaneous. Divine strength flooded every fiber of his being. Sota launched himself back into the blood-soaked fray. There was no pulling him back now. Kutura could only roar his absolute support into the blazing chaos. The colossal ogre was blasted through the air like a rag doll. It crashed into the earth, utterly destroyed. For the first time, the legendary commander stared in breathtaking disbelief. A colossal shadow loomed. The enemy blocked their path. Sota stepped forward. Inferno erupted from his very flesh. He locked eyes with Yamato. His resolve burned brighter than the fire. Yamato was a distant peak, yet Sota refused to yield. He would climb that mountain. He would chase that unreachable back until his last breath. Another titan materialized from the void. Yamato exhaled a heavy breath. This was a wretched nuisance. But then, a subtle shift caught his gaze. Sota was mutating. Raw power bled from his core. It was an endless, terrifying torrent. His pupils shifted. They became piercing orbs of molten gold. Conflagration consumed him. The flames danced with savage fury. Their ferocious heat commanded absolute submission. Yamato spoke with cold clarity. The towering behemoth was the gate sovereign. This very beast had birthed the apocalyptic invasion. Slaying the king would not erase the swarm. The escaped monsters would remain bound to this realm. A single death would not magically cleanse the nightmare. Yet, he saw the lethal focus in Sota. Yamato posed a grim question. Would he claim this titan's head alone? Sota did not flinch. He embraced the burden instantly. Yamato trusted this deadly gamble, but he remained a coiled spring, ready to intervene against death. In a fractured second, Yamato vanished. He vaulted across shattered skylines like a phantom. Sota lost track of his shadow. The stage was now his alone. He inhaled the ash. He forged his focus. The mantle of battle was his. The ogre hoisted a colossal club. It brought the weapon down with earth-shattering wrath. Sota evaded by a hair's breadth, but a chill gripped his spine. The beast possessed an impenetrable fortress of flesh. His strategy was brutal and simple. Breach the guard, shatter its balance, incinerate it with hellfire. Sota launched into the abyss without a second thought. His fists became blazing meteors. Each strike unleashed a fiery detonation, but the behemoth stood unmoved. The assault only fueled its demonic rage. The ogre unleashed a deafening roar. A monstrous fist smashed into Sota. He was launched like a rag doll into concrete. The impact shattered the air. Sota spat crimson upon the debris. The titan remained flawless. Not a single scar marred its flesh. A dreadful revelation struck him. The beast was immune to the flame. It endured his inferno like a gentle breeze. His supreme weapon was utterly useless. His hellfire could not scorch it. This terror cut deeper than physical agony. Lightning could paralyze the beast. But paralysis brings no slaughter. Despair clawed at Sota. Then, an ancient memory surfaced. The voice of the primordial spirit echoed, "Do not lean entirely on inherited might. Your father's legacy is not absolute. The flame holds immense destruction. Yet, the universe harbors unburnable anomalies." The spirit's warning rang clear. Sota had once defied this wisdom with arrogance, but the spirit had pierced his pride. "Are you certain of your mastery? Raw power must never become blind recklessness." The phantom flame had bestowed a final technique, a hidden ace for the abyss. The mere concept had ignited his blood, but the grave warning resurfaced. This was no guaranteed salvation. It was a desperate gamble against fate. The world's greatest warriors often failed this art. Mastery demanded profound spiritual alignment. One must peer into their own naked soul. Past impatience flared in his memory. What was the secret? A divine strike? A celestial kick? He had demanded answers. The spirit had spoken of true martial essence. The physical form was entirely irrelevant. He must condense his entire existence into one apocalyptic blow. He had boasted of his relentless aggression. The spirit silenced his foolishness. True dominion over power requires absolute restraint. Life force naturally flows like a tranquil river. It branches through every vessel. Compressing that ocean into a singular needlepoint is agonizingly difficult. Grandmasters spend decades chasing this apex. Most only harvest mere fractions of their spirit. But a sovereign of the soul can bind the current. They can unleash a cataclysmic surge far beyond mortal limits. The concept was godlike, but the execution demanded transcendent focus. Amidst the bloody jaws of death, such serenity was a myth. Now, the battlefield screamed with chaos. How could he find absolute silence amidst the slaughter? Thus came the spirit's ultimate truth. This art was reserved for the brink of oblivion, and if the beast proves insurmountable, simply flee. Reality snapped back. Soda confronted the demonic overlord, but panic had completely abandoned him. His mind entered the absolute void, his spirit plunged into uncharted depths of focus. The inferno surged with blinding intensity. Yet, it obeyed his absolute command. The symphony of war vanished. The agony of shattered bones evaporated. The crucible with Yamato had forged this clarity. The behemoth unleashed a hellish roar to break him. Soda remained an unmoving mountain. The titan charged like a falling comet. In that fraction of a second, revelation struck. The supreme art made perfect sense. Soda erupted in flames and rocketed forward. He launched into the black sky. A maelstrom of fire trailed his ascension. He breached his own absolute limits. The spiritual current shifted. He locked onto the beast's skull. Emerald lightning tore the sky. The shockwave struck. The monster froze for a fractured second. A microscopic flaw in time. That was his absolute victory condition. He stared directly into the abyss of its eyes. He plunged his blazing fist into its colossal visage. He offered his entire soul to the strike. Upon impact, the legendary title resonated within his spirit. Soul Blast, an apocalyptic sun detonated from his knuckles. It was a supernova of power, dwarfing anything he had ever unleashed. A catastrophic impact shattered the earth. The colossal ogre hurtled across the battlefield. Soda's feet finally met the ruined ground. Merciless flames devoured the giant entirely. The monstrous beast collapsed. It would never rise again. Trembling, Soda raised his bloodied hand. He gasped for air, tasting hard-won victory in the wind. The truth blazed in his veins. He was rapidly ascending. The legendary realm of Yamato was finally within his grasp. Without warning, the world violently spun. His knees slammed into the brutal dirt. His life force bled away at a terrifying pace. Not now. He could not fall now. Kotura's dark elixir flashed in his memory. The grave, warning of its sinister curse, echoed loud. This agonizing decay was the brutal price of power. Heavy footsteps shook the battlefield. A nightmare circle of ogres closed in. His legs turned to heavy lead. Through fading sight, a dark realization loomed. Was this his pathetic grave? Elsewhere, Yamato stood before a colossal spire. It was a perfect pinnacle for what was to come. He shattered the earth, launching into the heavens. The vast cityscape stretched beneath his supreme vantage point. Touching down, his commanding voice reached out to Got. The report was swift and absolute. Squad 2 had successfully sealed the perimeter. 5 kilometers of absolute lockdown. Squad 1 mirrored the flawless execution. The Supreme Commander offered a low murmur of approval. The grand stage was set. The terrifying execution could finally commence. A terrifying azure flame erupted from his soul. The divine energy swallowed his mortal. It consumed the massive structure. The entire domain was bathed in overwhelming blue light. Death circled Soda in the form of bloodthirsty monsters. There was no time to calculate the next move. Logic vanished in the face of doom. Instinct completely took over. Victory meant absolutely nothing. Survival meant everything. Dying in this wasteland was never an option. He dragged his broken body upward. He braced for a merciless end. Suddenly, an apocalyptic blue flash shattered the dark. Divine lightning incinerated the monsters where they stood. What kind of godlike magic was this? The revelation struck him like heavy thunder. Only Yamato possessed such terrifying might. High above, Yamato raised a single fist. An endless ocean of blue aura roared from his core. A full 5 kilometers drowned in his supreme power. A deadly preparation was finally complete. His command fell with absolute authority. Size. The divine skill of punishment was unleashed. It annihilated every beast in its path. Across the ruined city, monsters crashed to the dirt, like lifeless puppets. Soda stood paralyzed in sheer awe. He had narrowly escaped the jaws of death, yet his flesh bore no new wounds. A chilling realization washed over his exhausted mind. This boundless aura was not merely vast. It did not just blanket the ruined metropolis. It possessed a lethal sentience, hunting only the monsters. Suddenly, a towering presence approached through the dust. The main character painfully turned his heavy head. Absolute relief washed through his shattered bones. He was still breathing in this brutal world. The commander-in-chief approached with triumphant strides. He highly praised the boy's miraculous survival. So, this is true supremacy. It was the only thought in the young warrior's mind. Yamato felt like an untouchable god. Darkness violently crept into the edges of Soda's vision. The world finally faded to black. In a split second, the commander caught his falling comrade. A shocking truth suddenly hit the commander. The aura of the boss monster was already gone. It had vanished long before his divine strike fell. The boy was merely a shield to buy time. Yet he had slaughtered the behemoth alone. A dangerous smile crossed Yamato's face. This rookie possessed terrifying, raw potential. Two formidable shadows emerged from the clearing smoke. They mocked their leader's blinding display of power. The legendary elites had arrived. Kakeru Amami, the unstoppable captain of Squad 1. Beside him stood Karen Sawaragi, his lethal vice-captain. These were the true pillars of the Heavenly Wolf Guild. Kakeru smirked, warning of the association's wrath over such reckless destruction. Yamato's eyes glinted sharply. He countered with a blade-sharp retort. Diplomacy was the captain's miserable burden to bear. The supreme leader was in terrifyingly high spirits. He had unleashed total chaos and secured a rare, brilliant gem. Kakeru locked his eyes on the unconscious boy. He demanded a name. Soda Suzaki. A name destined for legendary greatness. The commander tossed the boy's fate to Squad 1. He ordered them to forge him into a flawless weapon. Unseen by Yamato, Kakeru held a deep, hidden resolve to claim the boy anyway. Memories of the distant past surged violently. A fragile woman rested in a quiet room. A gentle, tragic smile graced her face as she held an ancient book. Tucked between the worn pages lay a hidden truth, a faded, treasured photograph. Bound by unbreakable fate, Kakeru stood beside the boy's shattered family. Protecting this boy was a sworn, inescapable destiny. Time violently shifted forward. Welcome to the Heavenly Wolf Stronghold. A brutal arena where warriors forged their killing arts. Tuma and Soda faced off in the blood and dust. The arrogant senior radiated intense, murderous intent. He was 100% ready to crush the rookie. Cold iron armor materialized across Tuma's flesh. A chilling taunt cut through the heavy air. Strike first. The young main character silently lowered his combat stance. But Tuma launched a treacherous, blinding assault. Monsters do not grant mercy, he barked. A true warrior lives eternally on the razor's edge. A fist of solid steel violently tore through the air. Soda's reflexes utterly failed him. A devastating blow crushed his skull. The harsh, merciless lecture continued. His ultimate technique was a glaring beacon of weakness. The boy spat blood, fiercely defending his past victory. Devastating strikes carry a fatal cost, Tuma roared back. They expose your very soul. A lethal blow requires flawless, calculated preparation. The reckless gamble had nearly cost the boy his life. His paralyzed body was absolute proof of failure. A suffocating dread had gripped the entire squad. The sinister curse of the Soul Roar art still lingered in his veins. Endless, grueling discipline was his only path to survival. A sharp voice suddenly severed the heavy tension. Footsteps echoed like cracking ice. Is this mere child's play? The newcomer demanded. The battered rookie blinked in sheer confusion. He dared to question her absolute authority. It was Karen Sawaragi, the terrifying vice-captain of Squad 1. Fury violently flashed in her sharp eyes. The lethal swordswoman demanded instant respect. Her heavy aura flared with punishing intensity. She stood at the absolute pinnacle of command. He was merely dirt beneath her boots. Yet within seconds, military discipline completely shattered. The elite warriors erupted into a chaotic, deafening argument. A heavy aura of dominance crushed the air. Soda braced himself. Such raw arrogance. She was merely a youth. Yet, she bore the mantle of vice-captain. Her presence was undeniably majestic. Soda acknowledged her strength. As Tuma armored up, a predator's gaze shifted. Karen locked her piercing eyes onto Soda. He bowed with unwavering respect. His voice remained steady. He declared his allegiance to Squad 1. Her eyes held sharp recognition. She knew his tale. The fortunate fool who felled a boss by pure chance. The heir to legendary conquerors of a forgotten era. Her words cut like a cursed blade. She named him a mere token of pity, a favor granted by the captain. The entire hall fell silent, listening to her venom. A cold curiosity flickered in her gaze. Why harbor such weakness? Tuma stepped forward, rage boiling. But Soda raised a single, calm hand. Her blade of truth struck deep. He accepted the insult. Yet, an unshakable fire burned within him. The captain had witnessed his hidden destiny. His current power was a mere spark. But a spark can ignite the world. He lowered his head. He demanded the crucible of her guidance. The predator hesitated. Her provocation had failed. He offered honor instead of wrath. Intrigued by his iron will, she accepted the challenge. Reality warped without a single whisper. Her spatial magic activated. The stone walls shattered into light. A vast, sunlit battlefield of emerald grass materialized. The false wind howled with lethal intent. This was no mere illusion. She issued a dark warning. Her strikes would carry the weight of death. She offered him a coward's mercy, a chance to beg for restraint. Soda nodded with absolute calm. He accepted the handicap. Her blood boiled at his sheer audacity. A pitiful worm, she had planned to spare his life. Yet, his serene insolence shattered her patience. The beast within her awakened. He would beg for the end. Karen unleashed her fury. The rage of Gaia. The earth roared in agony. Torrents of soil erupted, sealing Soda within a tomb of absolute darkness. Her cold laughter echoed across the plains. She demanded his surrender. Would he weep? Would he scream for salvation? Then, the temperature spiked. Crimson fire bled through the earthen tomb. The dome detonated into a storm of ash. Soda emerged, wreathed in roaring flames. His voice sliced through the smoke. He praised her fragile cage, a soft cradle for a warrior. Karen froze. Her shock twisted into pure, unadulterated wrath. She struck with apocalyptic force. The solid earth liquefied. A vortex of deadly sands opened beneath him. The abyss dragged him down. The terrain itself hungered for his flesh. Karen moved like lightning. Her fist became a meteor of destruction. But the spark became an inferno. Hellfire erupted from Soda's clenched fists. He met her charge head-on. Tuma screamed into the wind. They were crossing the line of mortality. Bloodshed was imminent. The clash would rip them apart. Tuma roared for a ceasefire. This was no longer a spar. Two forces of nature barreled toward annihilation. The impact would shatter the very air. But the explosion never came. Absolute stillness fell over the battlefield. An unstoppable force caught their raging fists. A phantom presence stood between them. Gravity inverted. They crashed into the dirt, their power completely nullified. Soda gasped for breath. His mind reeled. Captain Kakeru towered above them, a mountain of unfathomable power. The flames of their battle were snuffed out in an instant. Karen trembled in sudden dread. Her excuses died in her throat. Soda stared in sheer awe. What kind of monster was this man? A sovereign's voice echoed out. He declared his title as captain. A terrifying initiation. He smiled, welcoming the new recruit. Soda's heart hammered against his ribs. This was not a proper introduction. It was a brutal display of the gap between them. Kakeru offered a chilling smirk. Their bloodlust was still too high. Then, the spatial alarm shrieked. A crimson gate had torn through reality in the heart of the city. The vanguard descended. Soda, Kakeru, and Karen stalked through a desolate neighborhood. Silence choked the air. Their hunter's instincts flared. Eyes swept every shadowed alley. They scanned every rooftop. Every locked door hid potential death. The coordinates pointed to this exact hellscape. Yet, the streets lay undisturbed. A sickeningly peaceful facade. It was the calm before a massacre. Karen scowled at the endless concrete. A labyrinth of domestic monotony. This battlefield clouded her senses. It was an agonizing illusion. Every structure mirrored the last. Identical roofs, soulless windows, fences that blurred into an infinite cage. 5 minutes alone would seal her doom in this maze. Kakeru offered a dark chuckle. Their preemptive strike was a blessing from the heavens. Had they been delayed by mere seconds, the monstrous horde would have breached the seal. The streets would drown in blood. Thousands of innocent souls would have perished, a sin too heavy to bear. Karen nodded. Cold sweat trailed down her spine. Soda broke the heavy silence. Had the captain survived the prior calamity? Kakeru's eyes darkened. A single nod confirmed his tragic history. The march toward the unknown continued. Soda spoke a forbidden name. He recalled his former comrade, the warrior known as Ichigak Kotura. The boy had pledged his life to the heavenly wolf. The air instantly turned freezing. The veterans halted their steps. The captain spoke in grim tones. Squad 7's master had claimed the boy. Karen exhaled a cursed breath. Pity filled her hardened eyes. That unit was no sanctuary for heroes. It was a graveyard of broken souls, a death sentence masquerading as glory. Confusion clouded Soda's mind. He demanded the dark truth of Squad 7, but the answers died. Kakeru raised a single commanding hand. The atmosphere fractured. A terrifying distortion warped the world. Space itself screamed as it was torn apart. The dimensional rift manifested. The Crimson Gate stood tall. A portal of pure, bleeding light. It pulsed with a demonic, crimson heartbeat. But the true horror awaited. Shadows flickered at the abyss's edge. Another strike force stood in the bloody glow. Rivals in the jaws of hell. Soda tilted his head. The weight of guild politics eluded his mind. Kakeru stood firm. He delivered the association's mandate with absolute calm. The rival squad had answered a desperate plea. Terrified civilians often scattered their cries for help. They grasped at whatever salvation arrived first. A gaunt figure emerged from the shadows. Thick smoke drifted from his lips. He declared himself as Masatoshi Nisha, captain of Team Orion. He carried an air of pure arrogance. Kakeru offered a flawless bow. He announced himself as the Blade of Heavenly Wolf, Squad 1. The atmosphere instantly shattered. Team Orion froze. Absolute shock rippled through their ranks. Whispers erupted like wildfire. That legendary name struck fear into their hearts. Yet Nisha remained like stone. His eyes held no respect. Kakeru spoke with quiet authority. They held the association's decree to purge this gate. Nisha cut him down mid-sentence. He coldly ordered them to retreat. Murderous intent flashed in Karen's eyes. She bared her fangs. The Supreme Association itself had summoned them. Why should the wolves cower before stray dogs? Nisha's voice dripped with ice. He confirmed Kakeru's silent suspicion. The desperate locals had crowned Team Orion as their saviors first. The iron law of the association was absolute. Overlapping quests belonged to the first arrivals. No exceptions existed. Kakeru slowly closed his eyes. He respected the ancient rules. Yet, fleeing after receiving a sovereign decree would stain their honor. Even so, his voice never lost its polite cadence. He proposed a noble truce, a joint assault to eradicate the abyss together. A sharp scoff escaped Nisha. Elite factions always groveled for the association's favor, he mocked, but a sinister smirk crossed his face. He offered one absolute condition. Heavenly Wolf would become their pawns inside the gate. The captain nodded without hesitation. Karen's world spun. She glared at Kakeru in pure disbelief. Why bow to such a humiliating pact? Kakeru's aura remained an undisturbed lake. Bending one's neck to prevent useless bloodshed was a trivial sacrifice. The captain's wisdom was absolute. Karen swallowed her raging protests. Watching his master, an epiphany struck Soda. His captain possessed a terrifying serenity. That mountain-like peace conquered the chaos around him. Together, they breached the Crimson Portal. A dreadful premonition coiled in Soda's gut. The lesser hunters cast mocking glares at Kakeru. They mistook a sleeping dragon's mercy for weakness. Nisha secretly reveled in his own brilliance. This pretty-faced elite was merely a stepping stone. Conquering this demonic crypt with a top-tier captain as their shield would forge them a legendary reputation. Greed poisoned Nisha's mind. Enslaving the Heavenly Wolf would elevate his own name to the heavens. The illusion of control shattered instantly. They crossed the threshold. The atmosphere crushed their lungs. A suffocating darkness swallowed the light. Death closed in. Nightmare-born executioners materialized from the shadows. They were entirely surrounded. Dozens of armored behemoths raised colossal weapons. Team Orion paralyzed in terror. The color drained from Nisha's face. His shattered pride gave way to mortal dread. Desperate cries for orders echoed in the dark. Silence answered. The arrogant captain was paralyzed by overwhelming fear. Behind the crumbling front line, a primal force awakened. Soda unleashed his burning eyes. Hellfire danced within his irises. He calculated the enemy's terrifying aura. These were no mindless fodder. They emanated pure, suffocating malice. Soda recognized the grim truth. Team Orion was already dead. Kakeru murmured the chilling reality. Humanity's grasp on the abyss was pitifully blind. Crimson Gates held the title of supreme danger. Yet this was a realm beyond logic. If Vanguard Knights possessed such monstrous power, the dungeon core was an apocalyptic threat. A shadow lunged. A Death Knight swung its greatsword at a trembling Orion hunter. The hunter's soul left his body. Primal terror locked his joints. His legs turned to stone. Karen watched with absolute disgust. Their previous arrogance was a fragile mask. Now, they were nothing but weeping lambs. Soda vanished from his spot. The air exploded. Crimson flames erupted from his clenched fist. He intercepted the fatal strike. A blazing meteor crashed into black steel. The executioner's blade halted mere inches from the victim. The devastating impact shattered the silence. The surrounding behemoths locked their hollow gazes upon the burning boy. Sota calmly checked on the fallen hunter. Karen scoffed at his reckless mercy. Kakeru smiled faintly. The boy's body moved through pure, heroic instinct. To carve a path to the absolute pinnacle. That was Sota's sacred vow. A supreme conqueror permits no death in his domain. Karen stood frozen. Such a majestic dream sounded like foolish fantasy in this hellscape. But the boy of fire did not retreat. He unleashed a blazing tempest upon the armored giants before him. His indomitable will pierced both Kakeru and Karen's hearts. The captain's voice cut through the chaos. He questioned Karen's very soul. What drives your blade now? Sota became a storm of destruction. He weaved through fatal strikes. His flaming fists shattered armor. Deep within Karen, a forgotten ember ignited. Was her ultimate goal merely to stand above her peers? Kakeru's words echoed like thunder. What is your true desire? To bask in the envy of lesser guilds? The surviving Orion members drew their weapons. They fought a desperate, bloody struggle to survive the nightmare. A traumatic phantom seized Karen's mind. A cold, lifeless corpse. A soul she let slip through her fingers in the past. She remembered that crushing despair. That was the day she chose the sword. She abandoned vanity. She renounced the pursuit of glory. She swore to never taste that suffocating helplessness again. A blazing, unyielding fury erupted from her heart. Fury burned within her. She cursed herself for forgetting her instincts. A shadow slipped behind Sota. The enemy raised its cursed blade. Karen moved like lightning. The earth shattered. A jagged boulder erupted from the abyss. Her strike landed with godlike force. It crushed the night before it could even draw breath. Sota whipped around. Karen clenched her trembling fists. Never again. She refused to let death claim another comrade. The past would not repeat. She despised her own weakness. She had trained endlessly. Yet, she had nearly lost sight of her true warrior spirit. Kakeru watched from the shadows. A quiet, knowing smile crossed his face. Their eyes blazed with fury. His team had finally awakened their true purpose. Fear vanished. Their resolve hardened. They stood ready to face the absolute nightmares within the Red Gate. The shadows closed in. An endless tide of nightmarish warriors formed a ring of death. Yet, Sota and Karen did not take a single step back. Karen struck first. She wasted no time. She channeled her raw aura into the earth. She unleashed the legendary technique. Rage of Gaia. The battlefield ruptured. Colossal pillars of jagged stone shot into the sky. They pierced the air like the fangs of an ancient titan. She followed up instantly. Piercing strike! The colossal spikes crashed violently into the charging horde. Hope flickered for a fleeting second. Then brutal reality set in. The earth shattered against their armor. The dark nights did not even falter. The march of death continued. They trampled the broken ruins like dust. But Sota refused to surrender to despair. He stepped into the vanguard. His mana surged violently. He cast stun to paralyze their ranks. Then, he ignited the air with blaze. An inferno devoured the battlefield. The raging flames spread like a plague. The heat was fierce enough to liquefy solid steel. He pushed past his limits. He unleashed a devastating hellfire. A tidal wave of absolute destruction swallowed the armored horde. The smoke finally cleared. A chilling sight remained. The knights stood unbroken. Their armor was scorched black, but their demonic defense held firm. Dread washed over Sota and Karen. The truth was absolute. Hellfire could incinerate a single foe, but against a legion, it was useless. The swarm was endless. If Sota drained his mana at this frantic pace, death was certain. They would fall before the battle truly began. The unstoppable legion pressed forward. Sota narrowed his eyes. His gaze pierced through the chaos of the front line. Then, he spotted it, looming ominously behind the endless ranks of soldiers, a colossal commander. It stood perfectly still, yet its monstrous aura suffocated the battlefield. The very air warped around it. This beast was on an entirely different level. Karen locked onto the Titan. Her instincts screamed the truth. This was the boss. Its dominating presence eclipsed everything else. She barked a desperate command. Pour everything into that single target. Hold nothing back. If the king falls, the army will crumble. Their auras flared to the absolute limit. They prepared a devastating magical combination, earth, stake, and blaze. They compressed every drop of their mana. They bet their very lives on this perfect strike. Just as they released the blast, the Dark Commander slowly raised its colossal blade. The vanguard reacted instantly. Elite soldiers lunged into the line of fire. They locked their shields together in perfect synchronization. An impenetrable wall of steel formed in a heartbeat. The catastrophic combined attack slammed violently into the absolute defense. The shockwave shattered the earth. Deafening thunder roared. Yet, the commander remained completely untouched. Slowly, the dark giant pointed its blade forward. The execution order was given. The Shadow Legion charged as one flawless machine. A horrifying realization froze their blood. These were not mindless beasts. They possessed absolute discipline. They obeyed a master. This was no mere monster pack. This was an unstoppable army. Far from the slaughter, Nisha crouched in the dirt. He was paralyzed by absolute terror. He whispered to himself in despair. Why were they still fighting? Why did Kakeru's squad court death instead of fleeing? He did not sense the lethal presence behind him. Kakeru stood there like a phantom. Kakeru spoke with chilling calm. They fight because they know the cost of retreat. Two of Nisha's comrades screamed in pure panic. They begged for retreat. They demanded reinforcements. They wanted to abandon the front line to Heavenly Wolf. Nisha froze. Then, his eyes changed. No, cowardice would only buy them a delayed death. If this demonic legion broke through, the slaughter would not end here. The darkness would consume their town. Their homes would burn. Their families would be slaughtered. That singular thought shattered his fear. He rose to his feet. His voice roared over the chaos. They did not need to win this war. They only needed to survive and hold the line. That singular command ignited their souls. Team Orion surged forward. Every trace of hesitation vanished into the wind. They threw themselves into the abyss. They stood as a living wall between the horrors and Heavenly Wolf. They fought shoulder to shoulder with Soda and Karen. Cold steel clashed against cursed armor. Brilliant sparks rained down in a violent symphony of destruction. Raw magic detonated in every direction. Violent shockwaves fractured the earth. Kakeru watched from the void. Yet, this defiance was not enough. The enemy forces were overwhelming. The tide of darkness was infinite, and the colossal boss remained untouched in the shadows. Suddenly, Karen gasped. The atmosphere violently warped. Kakeru was awakening. The ground violently quaked beneath their feet. An apocalyptic pressure crushed the battlefield. Kakeru finally unleashed his true aura. The sheer terror of his power was absolute. She did not need to look. Karen felt it in her very soul. A primal force pulled her in, an irresistible synchronization of their auras. Their energies aligned flawlessly. The earth trembled and broke, surging upward. Kakeru harnessed their unified might to elevate the vanguard. Team Orion and Heavenly Wolf ascended. They stood upon a colossal platform of earth, forged by Karen's immense magic. Soda stared in awe. He demanded to know the truth. Karen's voice was calm. The captain had activated his domain to lift them all. Above them, the sky warped. A colossal fist of pure aura materialized. Giant killing. The phantom knights froze in sheer terror. The spectral hand descended. A single, catastrophic strike. The resulting shockwave was devastating. It tore through the knight army like a hurricane. Armored bodies shattered. They scattered across the bloody earth. Nothing could withstand that godlike force. Karen understood his intent. This was no mere attack. It was absolute annihilation. It carved a bloody path through the Legion. A direct road to the boss. The colossal fist did not stop. It carried the weight of a mountain, crushing everything in its wake. An overwhelming display of dominance, heavy enough to flatten thousands. A terrifying might that rivaled the Grand Captain himself. The witnesses were left trembling. This was their captain's true strength. The apocalyptic punch found its mark, striking the boss with absolute devastation. The catacombs shook violently. A deafening roar shattered their senses, but the cost was immense. Kakeru's aura flickered and dimmed. Sweat drenched his pale face. He gasped for air, his shoulders heaving. In that brief silence, the past called to him. A memory of his brutal training. He had struck a solid stone wall. Back then, the fracture was pathetic. Small, jagged, and weak. A mere shadow of his current might. Yet, his mentor had looked at that jagged crack. He had looked at the boy, and his eyes held absolute awe. He had praised the awakening of his power. Kakeru had been utterly drained that day, his body pushed past its mortal limits. The searing pain meant nothing. He had only seen the pride in his master's eyes, the profound joy of being truly acknowledged. That man was Soda's father. He had rested a warm hand on his trembling shoulder, a simple, heavy praise. You did well. It was the fierce pride of a father. Back in the bloody catacombs, the memory faded. Roaring cheers pulled him back to reality. His comrades screamed in victory. Soda was paralyzed with shock. The sheer madness of that technique. A single strike to erase an entire legion. Kakeru simply brushed it off, a cold, humble shrug. He claimed it was merely a tool of ruin, unadulterated destruction. No hidden tricks, no elegant magic, just absolute, brutal force. He called it inferior, less refined than Karen's grace or Kichiro's mastery. A rigid, uncompromising power, a clumsy sword that only knew how to break things. Soda froze completely. Why speak of his father now? His voice trembled as he asked the question. Did you know my father? Before the truth could be spoken, Nisha and his vanguard dropped to their knees, a deep, fearful bow, begging forgiveness for their blind ignorance. The terrifying truth was revealed. Captain Amami Kakeru was a living legend, a knight of the round. The unstoppable fist of destruction. Kakeru dismissed the legendary title, as if it were mere dust. But the mystery only deepened in Soda's mind. What were the knights of the round? Soda demanded answers. Karen stepped forward, her voice lowered. It was a secret hidden from the masses. She spoke of an ancient legacy. The Knights of the Round. The very first sovereign vanguard forged in Japan. The absolute pinnacle of power. The foundation of the entire player association. Those legends had ascended to the highest seats of authority, guiding the new era of awakeners. Kakeru's eyes darkened. There were always exceptions. Some walked a different path, leading new squads from the front lines. Others vanished into the shadows. Like Soda's father, choosing the bloody life of a mercenary. The boy stood completely paralyzed. His father and his captain. They had fought shoulder to shoulder. Kakeru smiled a nostalgic smile. The bond ran far deeper than blood. Soda's father was the master. The man who dragged Kakeru from the abyss. The savior who forged him into a legendary player. Far from the bloody catacombs. Inside the towering player association, Chairman Ryanuk Bandhu sat in his domain. The silence was suffocating. Bandhu glared from his throne. White smoke coiled from his cigarette, twisting like a serpent. Yusei and Yamato sat opposite him, tense and unmoving. A dangerous conversation was unfolding. The chairman knew everything. He knew Kichiro's son had infiltrated Kakeru's vanguard. Without warning, Bandhu crushed his cigarette. Sparks flew into the dark glass. His killing intent flooded the room. The verdict was absolute. They would bury the boy's crimes. His illegal breach into the forbidden catacombs, it would vanish from the records. Yusei bowed his head in gratitude, swearing to discipline the boy. But Yamato sat careless, slurping his drink with zero respect. The chairman's fury ignited. "Watch your insolent tone!" he roared at the chief. Yamato offered a hollow smile. A sarcastic whisper of gratitude left his lips. Yusei scrambled to bow lower, apologizing for the disrespect, promising that he and Kakeru would force the boy into line. But Yamato's eyes turned sharp. He spoke of ancient debts. Soda's father was their brother in arms. Shielding his son was an absolute duty. The chairman had no right to demand gratitude. Bandhu's patience completely shattered. He slammed his fist down. He was the absolute authority. The chairman of the association. Duty and law ruled here. Not ancient, sentimental bonds. A shadow crossed the old man's face. He saw it now. Yamato had transformed. His posture, his cadence, it was all too familiar. He was mirroring the very man they feared. The chairman delivered a grave warning. Heavenly Wolf thrived on raw might, but untamed power birthed catastrophic ruin. The boy needed to realize his perilous standing. Whispers of rebellion were already festering in the dark. Yamato did not deny his brutal pride, yet he claimed he bore the crushing weight of his throne. His voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Every dawn brought the same grueling question of righteousness. Then the air cracked. Blazing azure lightning erupted from his core. Sparks devoured the heavy room. He harbored no mercy for the weak. Fools who abandoned the struggle deserved nothing. The coward's whine meant nothing to a king. The crackling surge danced toward the chairman's lips. The tobacco ignited in a flash of blue fire. Traitors could bring their grievances to his blade. The old man inhaled deeply. The bitter ash summoned a ghost from the past, the very day Kakeru had stepped into this world. Raised in the same desolate hell, bound by the same twisted fate, Bando plunged into his ancient memories. His fist colliding with bone. A young boy hitting the dirt. The cruel reality that the abyss devoured childish fantasies. Blood stained the gravel beneath the boy. Bando roared with the fury of a desperate guardian. But the child simply glared back. Defiance burned in his eyes. He swore to conquer the system or die trying. He demanded a path into the slaughter. The violence nearly escalated. Then a savior intervened. A new warrior validated the boy's blazing resolve. An outstretched hand broke through the hostility. A gentle inquiry pierced the tension. The stranger spoke the name Suzaki Kichiro. The boy froze. This presence was entirely foreign. No aggression, no malice. Pure tranquility radiated from his soul. The boy accepted the lifeline. The wheels of destiny began to turn. Deep within the lightless abyss, the captain revealed the truth of their origins. 4 broken souls forged in the same forgotten ruins. Poverty choked their every breath. The elder brother bore the suffocating burden. He had to conquer the darkness to secure their survival. The hand that pulled him from the mire belonged to a legend, the father of his current comrade. A sudden warmth washed over the young warrior. Bloodlines intertwined across the battlefield. The boy prepared to dig deeper into the legend. Then the shadows ruptured. A blinding flash shattered the peace. Absolute paralysis gripped the squad. Reality tore itself apart. A portal materialized within the cursed domain. A rift inside a rift. A geometric impossibility. The natural laws of the dungeon had completely collapsed. Rational thought abandoned them. The vanguard stood rooted to the stone. Terror mingled with profound disbelief. Desperation clawed at the rookie's throat. He sought guidance from his invincible leader, a single command to shatter the nightmare. But the captain offered only silence. His gaze locked onto the swirling vortex. A hollow dread consumed his features. This catastrophic anomaly was not a first. The horrific past clawed its way to the surface. The original nightmare replayed in his mind. He stood shoulder to shoulder with his savior then, staring into the jaws of an absolute unknown, the domain of an apex predator, or a monstrosity beyond human comprehension. Courage blinded their judgment. They crossed the threshold together. Hell instantly broke loose. The massacre remained etched in his soul, a hero drowning in a pool of his own crimson, a shattered chest struggling for breath. The agonizing image of a dying mentor attempting to rise. A frantic call pierced the delusion. The captain snapped back to reality. His resolve turned to absolute steel. The command echoed with finality. He would breach the abyss alone. The vanguard must flee and summon the armada. Shock paralyzed his subordinates. Their god of war was demanding rescue forces. The sheer gravity of the crisis crushed the air. This was no ordinary slaughter. The rules of survival had fundamentally changed. Standard tactics equated to absolute suicide. They required overwhelming military might instantly. The shield maiden fiercely intercepted his path. Tremors racked her voice, but her gaze burned with defiance. She claimed her rightful title, the second in command. Retreat was a vile dishonor. The unit of 6 held the line before the yawning void. She shattered the illusion of fragility. Her sword belonged in the vanguard. She refused to cower in the shadow of a king. The captain's piercing gaze shifted to the rookie. Terror threatened to consume the boy, yet he choked down his panic and demanded to enter the fray. Rage and sorrow tightened the leader's jaw. The rejection was absolute. He would not sacrifice another innocent to his personal hell. The boy remained utterly bewildered. Then the shadows shifted. A lesser unit advanced. Their commander volunteered for the coward's duty. He laid bare his own devastating weakness, standing beside true apex predators. Their frail bodies would become instant liabilities within the spatial distortion. They were mere fodder. But the captain's disciples possessed monstrous, undeniable might. A true leader shields his warriors. But to forge them into legends, he must also trust their strength. Kakaru weighed the words. He nodded in silent agreement. He ordered Nisha's squad to fall back. They needed to contact the association. Immediate reinforcements were vital. A heavy wave of relief washed over the 2 subordinates. They would survive another day. Before departing, Nisha halted. He offered Soda a bow of deep gratitude for saving his comrade. Our main character flushed. The weight of genuine thanks was foreign to him. Hands clasped in a silent pact of warriors. Respect resonated in the dark. The remaining 3 stood firm. They watched Team Orion vanish into the shadows of the catacomb. Our main character offered a final wave. Suddenly, Dodd. A voice pierced his mind. The ethereal fireball manifested beside him. It floated as his eternal blazing companion. A jolt ran through his veins. Even now, the sudden presence caught him off guard. Its words carried the weight of destiny. What awaited them would shatter reality, a grand turning point. The very fabric of their fate was about to unravel. But the spirit's voice fractured. It distorted like a dying ember in a storm. The words broke apart. Yet, a single, haunting decree pierced the static. He had to face the abyss alone. The illusion suddenly shattered. Karen and Kakaru shouted his name, pulling him back to reality. He fiercely shook his head. He banished the dread and locked his focus. A monstrous presence lurked within the gate, and they were marching straight into its maw. Our main character muttered a quick apology. He stepped forward. He cast a final glance at his blazing companion. He told the flame to cast aside its fears. He did not walk alone. He marched beside mighty battle-forged allies. Soda charged straight toward the imposing gate, but a chilling warning echoed in his mind. No matter what terrifying truth awaited in the dark, one single misstep would cost him everything. Meanwhile, Nisha and his vanguard breached the outer gates. Safety seemed within their grasp. They quickly strategized to summon the association's might. The words died in their throats. Unseen blades tore through the air, a devastating phantom strike carved into their flesh. No sound echoed. No weapon flashed in the light. Only deep, catastrophic ravines ripped open across their bodies. Crimson painted the earth. His comrades collapsed in an instant. Nisha froze in pure terror. His mind failed to grasp the sheer, blinding speed of the massacre. A lone figure materialized behind them. A chilling voice commanded them to step away from the gateway. A suffocating aura radiated from the stranger. It was twisted. It was a vile, demonic darkness devoid of humanity. Pure wrath ignited within Nisha. He roared, demanding the bastard's identity. The fiend merely scoffed with cold disdain. Names held no meaning for the dead. To him, they were nothing but future fertilizer. Those arrogant words fueled Nisha's fury. He unleashed his alter ego awakening without hesitation. He braced for a fight to the death, but his primal instincts screamed a dark truth. This predator stood in an entirely different realm of power. Manifesting invisible, spatial cuts defied all logic. It demanded an immense casting time. Nisha refused to yield. His gauntlets flared with brilliant emerald energy. He launched forward like a thunderbolt. He cut a jagged path to strike the fiend. Yet, the monster stood absolute and unmoving. Nisha's advance was doomed. A tempest of unseen blades descended. They shredded him from every conceivable angle before his fist could even rise. Absolute agony detonated within his mortal shell. A crimson mist erupted into the air. He suffered the same brutal fate as his fallen squad. The stranger had not twitched a single muscle. That was the true, paralyzing horror. Nisha crashed heavily to his knees. He stared up at the abyssal figure towering above him. Monster. No other title could describe this entity. The fiend lazily nudged the broken bodies. He swept them back toward the gaping maw of the catacomb. It was a casual gesture. He was returning sacred sacrifices to a dark altar. Nisha remained anchored to the ground. Despair and bitter regret drowned his soul. He had utterly failed his comrades. The demon's chilling voice echoed once more. He noted their blood would nourish the earth perfectly. The butchered warriors lay silent in their own gore. The phantom turned his back and faded away without a second glance. Elsewhere, our heroes crossed the threshold. A deafening, unnatural silence devoured them. This was no ordinary quiet. The very atmosphere pressed down like a tomb. Not a single monstrous silhouette appeared. Nothing stirred. Only their own echoing footsteps shattered the dead air. Karen tightened her grip. She shattered the silence. This peace was entirely too sinister. The captain grunted in grim agreement. Their guard had to remain absolute. He boldly stepped forward. He vowed to map the treacherous pathways and hunt the shadows. He offered a final command before vanishing. Sharpen your senses. Trust nothing in this abyssal dark. Yet, cold dread anchored itself in Karen's chest. A suffocating premonition choked her. Invisible eyes were definitely tracking their every move. She called out to Soda. His gaze was wandering into the void once again. He offered no lies. He confessed that his mind was anchored elsewhere. A deep scowl carved across Karen's face. The chamber was an empty expanse. What spectral force could possibly command his attention? Soda paused. The air grew tense. There was something lurking in the dark. He had silently ignited his blazing phantom sight. He pierced through the veil of reality. He did not witness empty ruins. Wraiths. An endless sea of lost, wandering souls flooded the cursed catacombs. The revelation left his lips. Karen turned into a statue of ice. This silent dungeon was overflowing with phantoms of the dead. Soda pondered the ethereal lore. Souls, ghosts, specters. The grim distinction no longer mattered. Karen's voice trembled. Had he ever witnessed such a horrifying congregation? Soda gave a solemn nod. He had glimpsed spirits drifting through the academy halls. He had seen them in mundane spaces just yesterday. But this was vastly different. Never before had he witnessed an army of the dead this massive. He spoke softly. Most spirits appeared entirely human, just translucent echoes of the living, much like his father. But this place was different. An overwhelming sea of phantoms swallowed the air. A hidden meaning lingered in the cold breeze. Suddenly, he felt it. A piercing gaze. One lone specter stared straight into his soul. Without a second thought, Soda spoke to the shadow. Karen flinched. Confusion washed over her. She thought those words were meant for her. The main character quickly cleared the air. He was speaking to the dead. The spirit froze in pure shock. A living mortal had pierced the veil. Panic gripped the phantom. He bowed his head in desperate apology. With a trembling voice, he revealed his true name, Utsugi. As his panic faded, a miracle occurred. The blurry mist condensed. Flesh and bone materialized from the ether. Utsugi confessed his secret. He had trailed them from the shadows after hearing Soda clash with the captain. Soda narrowed his eyes. He dug deep into his recent memories. The realization hit him. The captain had tried to shield them from death. The memory flared back to life. Captain Kakeru ordering them to flee, demanding they seek reinforcements while he faced the abyss alone. Utsugi lowered his gaze. A parallel tragedy cursed his past. Deep within the ancient catacombs, his own squad had awakened a terrifying nightmare. His comrades made a fatal choice. They ordered him to run. To survive and find help, the Brotherhood was torn apart. He fled into the darkness alone. The others stood their ground. But time was a cruel master. Salvation arrived too late. His comrades were slaughtered to the last man. He was weak. He would have been a burden. Yet, he wished he had perished by their side. The bitter memory crushed his spirit. Ghostly tears fell. Abandoning them was his ultimate sin. The regret devoured his soul. If only he had possessed Soda's blazing courage, perhaps destiny could have been rewritten. The spirit poured out his sorrow. Soda echoed every tragic word to Kareen, bridging the gap between the living and the dead. Karen's hardened gaze melted into pity. Her voice turned remarkably gentle. She asked how they could break his chains. Soda blinked, utterly stunned by her mercy. She refused to let him wander in torment. They had to sever his worldly ties, to grant him eternal peace. A warm smile spread across Soda's face. He was merely a phantom now. But Karen's resolve was absolute. She would not abandon a lost soul to this wretched purgatory. Soda pierced the phantom with a serious look. He demanded to know his deepest regret. 1,000 sins burdened Utsugi. Yet, one desire burned brightest. He wished the world had witnessed his dormant power. He craved the heat of battle. To unleash his gift just once. He wanted his existence to mean something. Soda pressed for the truth. He asked for the name of this hidden art. Island. The spirit whispered the ancient title. Soda decoded the mystery for Karen. It was the power of shared vision, a mental link binding their sight. Karen analyzed it instantly. A masterful tool for scouting, but practically worthless in a clash of blades. Her eyes narrowed sharply. Soda was muttering to himself again. She snapped him back to reality. The chaotic mumbling was driving her mad. A sheepish apology escaped his lips. But his mind was racing. He had uncovered a terrifying truth. This discarded skill held legendary potential. Karen and the Phantom stood paralyzed in disbelief. Legendary? Truly? A confident smirk danced on Soda's lips. He opened his mouth to reveal the secret, but fate abruptly turned the page. Deep within the abyss, Captain Kakeru faced a towering iron gate, his fists clenched with explosive tension. It was a perfect replica of the nightmare they had already survived. The sinister truth was undeniable. A colossal, knight-like monstrosity erupted from the shadows behind him. Yet, Kakeru stood unbroken. Fear had no place in his heart. He had anticipated the guardian. The behemoth raised its massive blade. It cleaved the air with devastating fury. Kakeru intercepted the lethal strike. The earth shattered beneath him. But the titan remained completely immovable. Shock surged through Kakeru's veins. He launched a desperate kick to tear the distance open. His mana flared to life. Giant killing. A torrential storm of azure aura erupted around him. He unleashed the devastating technique, Ren's Strike. A colossal fist of blue energy pulverized the Guardian, a catastrophic impact. Yet, the Abyssal Knight merely flinched. The supreme attack was completely absorbed. Kakeru's expression darkened into a grim scowl. This beast was on an entirely different plane, vastly superior to the armored trash they had slaughtered before. He moved like lightning, unleashing a barrage of lethal strikes from every blind spot. Yet, every blade, every technique shattered against the iron defense. A grim realization settled in his gut. Only his ultimate technique could shatter this wall, Conquering Fist. But the charge time was fatal, seconds he simply did not possess. Suddenly, a familiar voice ripped through the battlefield. Karin and Soda materialized at his flank, their auras blazed with lethal intent. Soda stepped into the front line. He boldly declared they were seizing control of the vanguard. Kakeru roared his rejection. This monstrosity was an apex predator. He barked absolute orders. Fall back. Provide cover. Buy him the precious seconds he needed to end this. But Soda defied the command. He planted his feet firmly into the trembling earth. A fearless confidence radiated from his core. He swore upon his life. This guardian belonged to him and Karin. The duo stood shoulder to shoulder against the towering titan. An oppressive, suffocating pressure radiated from the beast, but terror could not breach their united front. This was their crucible, their moment to forge a new legend. They made a terrifying vow. This colossal demon would fall in exactly 1 minute. Captain Kakeru stared in sheer disbelief. Madness. Utter madness. He declared their survival practically impossible. This dark paladin eclipsed the previous dungeon lord by a mile. Just hours ago, they had teetered on the brink of death. They had begged for Kakeru's blade to save them. How could mere fledglings slay an ancient leviathan? It was a suicidal leap into an unreachable realm. The abyssal giant hoisted its colossal blade. It shifted into a flawless, murderous stance. Death was imminent. Soda spoke, his voice slicing through the tension. He acknowledged the grim truth. The captain had always bled to shield their weakness. But the time for hiding was over. A shield eventually shatters. If they forever cowered behind his shadow, they would never awaken their true power. His words carried the weight of a mountain. Absolute, unshakable, defiant. An intense, golden aura ignited around his body. The frail boy was gone. A true warrior now stood in his place. He was finally ready to embrace the flames of war. His burning desire for absolute strength had just become a reality. That was their ultimate goal. Kakeru froze. A chilling sense of familiarity washed over him. An ancient memory clawed its way to the surface. The echo of a past argument resonated in his mind. He stood before his own master. He demanded power. He loathed the suffocating safety of being protected. Karin lowered her gaze. Her voice was steady, yet reluctant. She shared Soda's burning resolve. This battle belonged to them, and them alone. They hungered for validation, not merely in the eyes of their captain, but in the depths of their own souls. They pleaded for the right to face this terror. The sheer weight of their determination caught Kakeru off guard. Silence stretched. Finally, he yielded. He granted his permission, but warned of the impending peril. Before the words left his lips, they interrupted. Their gratitude was swift and absolute. Kakeru stood rooted to the earth. A tempest of emotions raged within his chest. He was utterly overwhelmed by the ghosts of his past. Karin's voice pierced the heavy air. Soda erupted into motion. Blazing infernos spiraled around his form. Watching their fearless advance, a fierce brotherly pride formed a smile on Kakeru's face. Yet, the warmth vanished. A cold shadow fell over his heart. He witnessed Soda's majestic growth, but guilt whispered that he had no right to rejoice. The supreme joy of witnessing a disciple's ascension. It was a sacred privilege, one he had violently stolen from his own master, Kiro. The battlefield reeked of impending doom. The very atmosphere grew thick and suffocating. Reality itself held its breath for the coming slaughter. Karin knelt. Her palm struck the desolate earth. A radiant, ethereal light bled from her fingertips. It fractured the stone, crawling across the domain like glowing veins of arcane power. The earth violently convulsed. Colossal monoliths shattered the surface. They tore through the soil, answering their master's divine summon. Soda possessed zero hesitation. His focus was absolute. The instant the stone pillars manifested, he exploded forward. He ascended the first towering crag with a single monstrous leap. He became a blur of fiery motion. He treated the floating mountains as mere stepping stones. Every explosive push launched him higher, faster, and closer to his prey. Behind the armored monstrosity, the earth roared in defiance. A titanic hand forged of solid granite materialized, its fingers clenched into an apocalyptic fist. It swung with catastrophic momentum. The colossal strike annihilated the enemy's blind spot. A deafening shockwave ripped across the ruined plains. The ironclad titan was violently launched forward. Its massive frame spiraled out of control. It plummeted directly into Soda's lethal trajectory. Hellfire engulfed Soda's right arm. He coiled his fist back, channeling raw destruction. The flames roared, burning with the intensity of a dying star. The abomination entered his domain of death. Soda unleashed his fury. He drove his blazing fist downward with world-shattering force. The apocalyptic impact drove the beast deep into the earth. The bedrock fractured into a massive, jagged crater. From the desolate distance, Kakaru watched in silent judgment. Their synergy was flawless. Their strikes flowed like a deadly river. No hesitation. Yet, a crucial fragment of true power was still absent. Their onslaught carried devastating weight, but it lacked the absolute lethality needed to sever the thread of life. The nightmare clawed its way out of the abyss. Its armor was scorched, charred, and battered, but it remained standing. Karen's eyes widened, her reaction instantaneous. She struck the earth with devastating intent. Massive, jagged rocks erupted. They coiled around the beast's legs like unbreakable chains of the underworld. The stone restraints violently tightened. The creature was imprisoned, stripped of its mobility. Karen's voice cut through the chaos, commanding and sharp. "Soda!" The monstrosity tilted its helm. In a flash of blinding light, Soda materialized. A maelstrom of furious flames devoured his silhouette. Simultaneously, Karen invoked her mastery. Colossal earthen fists formed in the creature's shadow, a flawless pincer attack. The trapped beast awaited its inevitable doom. Soda unleashed hell from the vanguard. His magma-infused strikes bombarded the beast, melting its unholy armor. Karen's titanic fists battered its spine without mercy. But the Dark Knight unleashed a blood-curdling roar. With an explosion of demonic strength, it shattered its stone prison. Shrapnel rained down like lethal hail. The Titan reclaimed its balance, an aura of pure malice erupting. It wasted no time. It hoisted its massive greatsword. The blade cleaved the air in a terrifying, deadly arc, aimed right at Soda's neck. Death approached within an inch. Instantly, an impenetrable fortress of stone erupted from the earth. It severed the blade's path. Karen's divine reflexes defied death. Her absolute defense absorbed the apocalyptic blow. Soda retreated into the shadows. His chest heaved, but his eyes blazed with predatory focus. Kakaru's gaze narrowed. Their synchronization was godly. Fear held no dominion over them. Their minds remained terrifyingly sharp amidst the slaughter. A revelation struck Soda. The beast's combat patterns were a mirror image of their past foes. Its movements were rigid and predictable. The inferno in Soda's eyes mirrored his rising aura. He peered through the veil of fire. He dissected the monster's anatomy with surgical precision. He decoded its martial rhythm, the subtle shift of its unholy weight, the exact mechanism of its iron defense. And then, the truth revealed itself, buried beneath the impenetrable steel, shrouded in darkness. A singular, fatal flaw existed within its corrupted soul. A phantom light pulsed near its hollow chest, right where a human heart should beat. But as his murderous intent locked on, the core shifted like a ghost. The core was alive. It navigated through the armor. A single, perfect strike, Soda whispered into the chaos. Without warning, a javelin of solid rock exploded from the abyss. It impaled the beast from behind, ruthlessly tearing through its shoulder. The catastrophic force ripped the limb from its socket. The armored arm crashed against the ruins, echoing like a death knell. Karen declared that Soda's vision had exposed its doom. She stood like a goddess of war amidst the destruction. Her hand remained connected to the trembling earth. The battle was nearing its violent end. Absolute tranquility washed over her. She exerted zero effort. Utsugi's divine vision Island bridged their minds. She witnessed the world through Soda's eyes. The enemy's fatal flaw lay exposed. There were no more secrets in the shadows. Soda became a statue amidst roaring infernos. He awaited the decisive moment. Karen initiated the assault. Her fingertips grazed the ruined earth, a tempest of battlefield debris ascended into the heavens. She called herself a humble maiden. The grand stage belonged solely to the hero. She would merely set the scene. A violent sandstorm engulfed the monstrous foe. Absolute darkness stole its sight. Its towering stance crumbled under the sheer force. The armored giant swung its blade in blind fury. It slashed at empty shadows. Within that dusty chaos, Sota became a living missile. Crimson flames erupted with blinding intensity. Fire forged an impenetrable armor around his flesh. He closed the distance. A mighty roar tore from his throat. It was the ultimate spirit roar. He channeled every ounce of his soul. His blazing fist launched forward like a meteor. The inferno punch shattered the beast's chest. It struck the core with lethal precision. Absolute silence swallowed the battlefield. Then, a volcanic eruption of fire exploded from within the dark armor. Blazing fissures ravaged the demonic steel. Hellfire devoured the monster from the inside out. The colossal knight stumbled. Its physical form completely unraveled. The furious winds finally ceased. The titan crashed into the ruined earth, reduced to ashes, erased from existence. Less than 60 seconds had passed. Yet, the clash felt like an eternity of war. Utsugi watched in absolute shock. The execution was flawless and brutal. Sota turned back toward the phantom. Heavy breaths left his lungs, but a triumphant grin stretched across his face. "You did it," the hero declared. Sota extended a bruised fist toward the spirit. He demanded a warrior's salute. Without that miraculous vision, death would have claimed them all. Tears threatened to spill from Utsugi's ghostly eyes. He stepped forward with newfound pride. Their fists collided in silent respect. His cursed power had finally forged a miracle on the battle. The very fabric of reality warped. An ethereal azure system window materialized. Its sacred glow illuminated the darkness. A divine decree manifested. The wandering soul of Utsugi no Mi finds peace. The ultimate regret has vanished. Combat conditions satisfied. Then, a second revelation etched itself into reality. Divine ability inherited. The island blessing now links mortal sights. A gentle chuckle escaped Utsugi's lips. The heavy chains of his mortal sorrow shattered. He bowed his head to Sota. Unending gratitude poured from his spiritual voice. This salvation was born entirely of Sota's courage. His gaze shifted toward Captain Kakaru and Karin. He offered them his deepest reverence. Suddenly, the newly awakened system power flared. The world shifted. The phantom was no longer a mere shadow. His physical outline solidified before their very eyes. Captain Kakaru recoiled in sheer astonishment. Karin froze in absolute awe. A silent gasp escaped her parted lips. She confessed her past doubts regarding the island magic. She had believed the magic was too fragile for war. It was a scholar's trick, utterly useless in bloodshed. Yet, Utsugi's ethereal voice had paved her path to victory. His guidance was a beacon in the storm. His absolute composure had anchored her mind. That unyielding calm became her ultimate weapon. She offered him her eternal thanks. Utsugi responded with a tranquil, radiant smile. Witnessing their triumph was his final, greatest joy. The main character felt a surge of profound relief. But suddenly, the hero's fiery gaze darkened into pure dread. Utsugi issued a chilling prophecy. Passing through the previous gate had awakened a terrible omen. The warriors exchanged glances of deep confusion. What nightmare lurked in the shadows? Which threshold hid the abyss? Utsugi spoke in a haunted whisper. He could feel his very identity decaying. Remaining in this cursed purgatory meant ultimate erasure. He would devolve into a mindless phantom, a hollow shell eternally bound to the dark. The entities here possessed no humanity. They were desolate, mechanical voids. Their cores had been devoured by an unseen terror. "Flee this abyss," he begged them. Then, the ghostly light surrendered to the dark. He vanished without a single trace. A suffocating silence crushed the three survivors. "What does it mean to lose your own soul?" Sota muttered into the quiet abyss. Did the previous spirit sense this creeping madness? Are these horrors all connected? Karin released a heavy, trembling breath. The phantom's final prophecy was far too grim for comfort. She shot a piercing glare at Sota. Would the mighty hero tuck his tail and run? Was he ready to retreat from destiny? Retreat was never an option. Sota spat back. A hollow, nervous laughter echoed between them. They used humor to mask the terrifying reality. Karin commanded Captain Kakaru to advance. Idling here invited certain death. This labyrinth of bones demanded their conquest. A colossal gate of pure gold barricaded their path. Kakaru marched forth without a shred of fear. He planted both hands against the ancient metal. The monolithic doors groaned like awakening beasts. They yielded to his sheer strength. An unimaginably vast chamber stretched into infinity. Radiant gold blinded their mortal eyes. The walls, the earth, and the towering monoliths gleamed with sacred wealth. Eternal flames roared across the sanctuary. Blazing reflections danced across the mirrored opulence. It was a divine, subterranean empire, a palace forged for long-forgotten deities. Soda and Karin were struck entirely mute. Kakaru broke the golden silence with a grim whisper. This forgotten realm triggered a deep, buried memory within him. Suddenly, Karin aimed a trembling finger forward. She screamed for their immediate attention. Cold sweat drenched the captain's pale face. A nightmarish monolith occupied the grand center. It was a gargantuan, unholy egg. Its obsidian shell pulsed with vile streaks of corrupted purple and gold. It possessed no holy radiance. Instead, it radiated a suffocating, demonic aura. The very oxygen around it turned into thick, toxic dread. Karin whipped her head toward the blazing hero. "Do you know what this demon core is?" she demanded. But as her eyes locked onto his face, her blood turned entirely to ice. Pure terror gripped Soda. He stared like a man condemned. Beside the massive egg, a phantom stood guard. He dared not breathe. The spectral visage was undeniable. It mirrored Captain Kakaru flawlessly. This was no mere illusion. It was the captain's very soul. A cry of absolute horror tore from Soda's throat. The scene shattered. Memories flooded his mind. Yamato sat casually before Chairman Ryunosuke Bandu. The room was thick with tension. The chairman leaned forward. He asked a grave question. Could a living man's soul wander freely? Yamato did not hesitate. He unwrapped a suite with terrifying calm. He nodded slowly. He spoke of Vice Captain Gu from the second squad. There was no doubt in his mind. Soda had faced this very phenomenon in the dark catacombs. He had seen the Vice Captain's phantom. He had assumed the warrior had fallen in battle. The undeniable truth emerged later. The spectral figure was a perfect match. Yet, the living man remained completely unharmed. The chairman took a slow sip of black coffee. He dismissed it as a mere doppelganger. Yamato crossed his fingers into a sharp symbol of denial. He rejected the notion instantly. The phantom mirrored every martial technique perfectly. The chairman frowned in deep confusion. Yamato scoffed coldly. He mocked the old man's narrow vision. Annoyance flared in the chairman's eyes. Yusei stepped in immediately. He delivered a swift blow to Yamato's arm. The joke had gone far enough. Yamato's tone shifted. A dark theory lurked beneath his words. He tore into another wrapper. He confessed his grim hypothesis. Soda had conversed with that wandering spirit. Every word aligned flawlessly. The phantom shared the exact history of the living vice captain. The memories were identical. The battle scars matched. They were two halves of one ultimate truth. Yamato raised his hands. One held a half-eaten sweet. The other held a flawless piece. He posed a chilling question. What if a single existence fractured into two? Two distinct entities, one shared timeline. Then he dropped a heavier revelation. The very air grew freezing cold. What if an identical universe existed before this one? The memory faded abruptly. The grand golden palace returned. Soda stood paralyzed by the impossible. The living captain stood at his side. Yet, across the hall, the captain's soul guarded the mysterious egg. Reality itself seemed to tear apart. A desperate scream shattered the silence. Karin roared Soda's name. Her voice echoed violently against the golden pillars. He tried to turn. He was too late. Agony erupted through his chest. An unseen blade struck with divine speed. Metal shrieked against flesh. It was a sickening sound of absolute destruction. Crimson blood exploded into the air. His mind blanked in shock. He had sensed zero killing intent. He had heard no approaching footsteps. Death arrived without a single warning. There had been absolutely nothing behind him, yet his body collapsed. Shadows twisted near a grand pillar. A lethal silhouette emerged from the dark. The nightmare had returned. It was the same demon Nishida's squad had faced. A cruel smirk crossed its face. It proudly announced its first sacrifice. The devastating slash tore through his flesh. The strike was unnaturally clean, impossibly deep. Dark blood flooded the radiant golden floor. Far across the chamber, the captain's phantom remained frozen. It stood silently beside the colossal egg. It launched no attack. It made no move to defend. It merely watched the slaughter unfold. Confusion warped the spirit's face. It seemed entirely lost. Yamato's dark prophecy struck Soda's fading mind. Was this world trapped in a grand loop? Soda lay utterly broken. His lifeblood stained the gold. The captain's phantom stood paces away. Its empty gaze remained fixed upon him. The spirit held no wrath. It held no sorrow. It was completely blank. Karen slammed into the blood-soaked floor beside him. Panic consumed her. Her hands violently trembled. She ripped the fabric from her arm. She wasted not a single second. She slammed the cloth over his ruined chest. She fought desperately to stop the bleeding, but the crimson tide soaked through instantly. The ghostly captain observed the tragedy. He loomed like a silent god. He watched Soda's life slip away. The dark blood flowed without end. Darkness claimed him completely. Then came a sudden jolt. Soda gasped and opened his eyes. The golden palace was gone. The agonizing pain had vanished. His flesh was entirely whole. He stood in a vast, ethereal void. He stared down at his flawless body. Total bewilderment clouded his mind. He scanned the infinite emptiness. He sought desperate answers. Then he felt a colossal presence looming before him. A towering figure blocked his path. It was Captain Kakaru. The overwhelming aura was unmistakably terrifying. The face was identical. The monstrous presence was exactly the same, but a dark patch concealed one eye. A chilling anomaly. Instinct screamed at Soda to fight. Every nerve stood on end. This entity felt fundamentally wrong. He refused to be deceived by an illusion. He braced for a demonic trap. He expected lies, but the towering warrior spoke with absolute calm. He shattered Soda's doubts immediately. He claimed to be the true Amami Kakaru. He was not the captain of this timeline. He was a survivor of a dead reality. The words spun a web of pure madness. A previous world? Soda ignited his ocular powers. Blazing flames erupted in his eyes. He pierced through the entity's spiritual core. Dread crashed over him like a tidal wave. The soul was pure. The identity was absolute. This truly was the legendary Captain Kakaru. The veteran warrior spoke of a shattered timeline. He revealed the grand reset. Time itself had coiled backward. He was a lone relic of the forgotten loop. Soda's mind fractured under the colossal weight. This defied the very laws of existence. What cosmic reset? When did reality break? Why had the heavens rolled back time? Chaos reigned in his thoughts. Then the scarred captain smiled. His majestic voice rumbled with pride. He declared that Soda had grown truly strong. In the previous timeline, Soda was merely a shadow, a weak soul carrying their burdens, struggling just to survive in their wake. He harbored dormant potential. But this was different. One glance revealed the truth. His very aura had transformed. He possessed true power. The praise tasted bitter. Even with this newfound strength, he had fallen. The enemy's blade had struck him down with terrifying ease. Weakness gnawed at his core. He buried the shame. He needed the truth. In that forgotten timeline, did he meet his end? Kakaru slowly shook his head. Soda survived. The one who perished was Kakaru himself. A dark memory violently surged into his mind. Crimson stained the cold floor beneath Soda. Karin trembled in sheer terror. And Kakaru? He had stood there, frozen, powerless. The bitter truth struck Kakaru like lightning. Destiny had granted him a second chance. Yet, while Soda evolved, Kakaru remained utterly stagnant. Within the grand golden hall, a nightmare unfolded. The enemy stood before the colossal egg. His gaze brimmed with fanatical reverence. He witnessed pure, divine majesty. A twisted euphoria consumed his soul. This was the absolute pinnacle of his wretched existence. Tears of madness streamed down his face. He praised his past incarnation for this triumph. His fractured memories had finally blessed their abyssal void. The scene shifted abruptly. A haunting vision from the past. Kakaru, broken and kneeling. Beside him lay Kaichiro, drowned in his own blood. Towering over them was that exact same monster. But the present demanded vengeance. The enemy reveled in his glory. Then, a colossal strike shattered the moment. The impact was absolutely devastating. The fiend was launched across the vast hall. He slammed into the golden wall, carving deep, jagged fissures into the divine metal. Kakaru stood tall. His aura boiled with unrestrained fury. His very fists trembled with pure, lethal intent. The reason was entirely clear. This monster had dared to strike down his comrade. The unforgivable sin demanded blood. Karen was completely paralyzed. Her captain unleashed absolute wrath. Soda lay dying. The sheer terror overwhelmed her fragile mind. Soda clung to the edge of consciousness. He witnessed the devastating blow. A mortal man would have been obliterated instantly, reduced to mere dust. The spectral voice of Soul Kakeru echoed in Soda's mind. A chilling whisper. That strike was not enough. The physical realm violently shifted. The tides of battle turned. Kakeru's immense stance suddenly broke. A blinding slash tore across his eye. Crimson erupted in a violent spray. Agony surged through his nerves, forcing him to retreat into the shadows. Despair gripped Karen's heart. Both warriors were severely wounded. Then, a chilling presence manifested behind her. The monster had bypassed them all. The enemy sneered with absolute malice. He cursed his own flawed strike. He had aimed to cleave Kakeru's skull, but his mangled right hand had betrayed him. Kakeru clenched his jaw with supreme force. Hellfire burned within his ruined eye. He swallowed his screams of agony. He anchored his feet to the ground. Surrender was not an option. The enemy merely scoffed, commanding him to die in silence. The monster spat venomous words. They had defiled his sacred triumph. With a flick of his wrist, he produced a mysterious vial. He looked down upon them as absolute trash, mere insects sullying his divine sanctuary. He mocked their survival, crediting his own merciful restraint. Madness consumed his features. He unsealed the vial. In one gluttonous motion, he drained the unholy elixir. The final drop vanished. His pupils ignited with a demonic, blood-red glow. An overwhelming aura violently erupted. His meager patience had completely evaporated. Bone crunched as his mangled hand instantly regenerated. The monster grinned. He swore to butcher them all, to reduce their flesh to dust upon the golden floor. Soda's lifeblood pooled beneath him, yet his mind raced. This adversary was not just powerful, he was a pure, chaotic nightmare. He ordered his shattered body to rise. He had to defend his captain. But the spectral voice of Soul Kakeru paralyzed him. Do not intervene. Confusion tore at Soda's mind. Why stand down? Soul Kakeru's answer carried the weight of 1,000 lifetimes. I know him perfectly, because I am him. He has sought a battlefield to serve as his grave, a death wish born from a fatal mistake, the day he allowed Kaichiro to fall. The revelation struck Soda like a blade. The ultimate, damning truth was finally spoken. He was the reason Kaichiro perished. He had forsaken Soda's father. The very atmosphere collapsed under the weight of his sin. The phantom locked eyes with the broken sun. The ultimate question hung in the heavy silence. After learning this dark truth, will you still save Amami Kakeru? The curtain falls on today's epic clash. Craving the next explosive chapter? The journey continues on my secondary channel, Manhwa Updater. The Battle of Fates is far from over. Do not miss the legendary continuation. Step into the void and join our ranks. Gratitude for walking this path with me. Stay fierce, remain unstoppable, and prepare for the next legendary encounter.